Hello, everyone. Imagine being unemployed, completely broke, and surviving on nothing but cheap supermarket food. Then one day, while ordering some cheap convenience store food online, you discover a mysterious ring hidden inside the package. At first, it seems like a worthless trinket, but it turns out to be a gateway to a post-apocalyptic world. In that world, gold and silver are treated like trash, while food is considered a triple S rank treasure. A single convenience store snack can be worth more than a fortune. With nothing more than a bag of cheap groceries, you can enter this ruined world and return with pockets full of gold. While everyone else is desperately fighting to survive, you have a unique advantage. By trading spicy snacks and everyday convenience store food, you can acquire gold, priceless resources, and even advanced future technology. Step by step, you rise far above the competition and begin climbing toward the pinnacle of success. And that's exactly what happens to the protagonist of this story, Chen Yang. Without further delay, let's jump right into the story. The story began in a barren, abandoned wasteland where a lone lizard wandered in search of prey. Suddenly, a loud scream echoed from behind one of the ruined buildings. Between the abandoned structures, a brown-haired boy in a red jacket, our protagonist, came running in panic. Several zombies were chasing him, and while fleeing, he could only cry out that this was bad and that he was finished. As he ran, a red-haired zombie suddenly appeared in front of him with a wide grin, ready to attack. Reacting instantly, the protagonist dropped into a slide and crashed into the zombie. The zombie lost balance and was dragged across the ground. Looking at it in disbelief, the protagonist complained that the thing even knew how to set up an ambush. Still running for his life, he realized the situation he was in and worried that he had only just arrived in this world. Was he really going to die immediately? Then he noticed smoke rising from one of the abandoned buildings. Staring in that direction, he wondered if it was cooking smoke. Excitement immediately replaced part of his fear. Thinking it had to be a human settlement, he rushed toward it, believing that if he could just make it there, he might survive. But before he could get far, his foot struck a stone. He was thrown forward, rolled across the ground, and landed face first. At that moment, a zombie charged toward him with its mouth open. Terrified, the protagonist shouted that he would never randomly get ice-skied again. Just then, a gunshot rang out from behind him. A bullet fired from a high-tech weapon shot past him and tore straight through the zombie's head before it could attack. The zombie dropped from midair and collapsed over him, making it look as though it was hugging him. Completely stunned by everything that had happened, the protagonist could only wonder what was even going on. More zombies quickly advanced toward him. Behind him, someone calmly reloaded. Then a barrage of bullets was unleashed. The incoming zombies were struck one after another and eliminated instantly. Relieved and overwhelmed, the protagonist sat on the ground and asked in disbelief if he had actually been saved. However, the dead zombie was still draped over him like an unwanted embrace. A voice called out from behind. Still pinned beneath the corpse, he turned around. Standing, there was a beautiful red-haired girl holding the high-tech gun. She approached and asked how long he planned to keep hugging that thing. The protagonist looked down, realized the zombie was still lying on him, and immediately shoved it away in disgust, warning it not to touch him. After pushing the body aside, he turned back and thanked her. But instead of relaxing, the girl raised her gun and pointed it directly at him. She ordered him not to move and demanded his name. The protagonist slowly raised both hands and introduced himself as Chen Yang, Yang as in sunshine. Without lowering her weapon, the girl questioned why he had suddenly appeared near their camp. Trying to act relaxed, Chen Yang lowered his hands slightly and moved a little closer, asking whether she would believe him if he said he simply got lost and wandered over. The girl's expression sharpened. She accused him of still lying and said she had clearly heard him mention traveling between worlds earlier. Chen Yang raised his hands again and worried internally that if he told her the truth, she would definitely think he was insane. The girl tightened her grip on the gun and warned that staying silent made it seem like he didn't want to live. But suddenly she paused. A delicious smell drifted through the air. She looked toward his jacket and asked what was inside his bag. Chen Yang pulled out a packet and casually showed it to her. Smiling, he explained that he had been about to eat the spicy strips when a zombie appeared, forcing him to shove them into his bag. The girl froze. Confused, she repeated his words and asked if that was actually food. Chen Yang confirmed it and offered her a taste. Looking at the packet, she became conflicted. The color looked strange and possibly poisonous, but the smell was incredible. and she hadn't eaten anything for 2 days. After a brief struggle, she decided to stop overthinking it. Without hesitation, the red-haired girl snatched the packet from Chen Yang's hand. After opening it and taking a closer look, she became absorbed by the smell and decided she would eat first and ask questions later. She carefully opened her mouth and tasted a single spicy strip. The moment the flavor hit her tongue, she froze in surprise. Holding the packet tightly, she blushed and admitted that it tasted incredible. The aroma of flour and oil mixed with seasoning was far better than anything she expected. Hearing her reaction, Chen Yang felt satisfied. To him, this was exactly how it should be. In a post-apocalyptic world, no one could resist food. That thought reminded him of how everything had started. He used to be nothing more than an ordinary office worker living a routine corporate life. A few days earlier, he had suddenly been fired and lost his only source of income. Unexpectedly, inside a box of snacks he had ordered online, he discovered a strange ring. Curious, he put it on. The instant he wore it, he was transported into this post-apocalyptic world. He appeared directly in front of a giant red monster rat with glowing eyes. The creature noticed him immediately and let out a roar. Overwhelmed by the sight, Chen Yang panicked and shouted that it wasn't a dead person at all, but a huge rat, while desperately trying to understand where he had ended up. The rat became even more aggressive and charged toward him. Terrified and nearly in tears, Chen Yang shouted for himself to go home immediately. At that moment, the teleportation activated. In the next instant, he appeared back inside his room. Looking around in confusion, he realized he had returned. His eyes slowly moved to the ring. Although he didn't understand how, he concluded that the ring allowed him to travel freely between reality and the apocalypse. Standing there, he began connecting the pieces. Based on years of watching anime, a sudden realization struck him. Food had to be hard currency in a post-apocalyptic world. If he used this ability properly, he might completely change his life. The memory ended and the scene returned to the present. Lilu looked at Chen Yang with an unusually soft expression. Then she lowered her head and pointed awkwardly at the empty packet, admitting that she had finished everything and apologizing because it had been too delicious to stop. Chen Yang simply smiled and told her it was fine. Then he explained that the organization he belonged to didn't lack food, but lacked many other supplies, which was why he had been sent out to exchange resources. Lilu stared at him in shock. She asked if there really existed an organization in this world that didn't lack food. Chen Yang smiled and told her she was already looking at one. Lilu immediately leaned closer and, blushing slightly, asked if he could hire her. She explained that she knew the surrounding area well and could help him find anything he wanted to exchange for food. As payment, she only wanted 15 packs of those spicy strips each month. Chen Yang considered it and replied that it wasn't impossible, but he knew absolutely nothing about her. Lilu asked what he wanted to know. Chen Yang started asking questions. Her name was Lilu. When he asked about her gender, she looked irritated and asked whether he couldn't tell himself. When he asked her age, she awkwardly answered that she was 19. Chen Yang looked her over and remarked in disbelief that for someone surviving in the apocalypse, her nutrition seemed unexpectedly good for that age. Realizing what he had just said, he quickly coughed and calmed himself. Then he placed a hand on her shoulder and told her that considering how helpful she had already been, he would hire her. Her monthly salary would be 15 packs of spicy strips. Lilu immediately clenched her fist in excitement and thanked him enthusiastically. After that, Chen Yang asked whether she had ever considered knocking him out and stealing the food instead. Lilu answered confidently that she wasn't stupid. She knew the difference between eating one full meal and being able to stay full every day. Then she pointed ahead and told him she would take him to the camp. Chen Yang smiled and told her to lead the way. After walking for some time, Lilu stopped and pointed towards several abandoned buildings ahead. She announced that they had arrived and introduced the place as Gray Rat District E, their camp. Chen Yang looked around. The surrounding area was worn down and in poor condition. Looking at the abandoned buildings and the environment around them, he quietly felt disappointed and thought that calling this place a camp was generous. It looked worse than a slum. Still, he quickly adjusted his thinking. Since he was already here, he decided he might as well stay for a while and see if he could obtain something valuable first. The two continued walking through the streets toward Li Lu's apartment. Along the way, Chen Yang noticed the people living there. Most looked exhausted and malnourished, and their living conditions were clearly harsh. Noticing him observing everything, Li Lu turned and told him not to be nervous. Since he was an outsider, She explained that it was normal for everyone to be cautious around him. After a while, she pointed toward a nearby apartment and told him that this was her place, inviting him inside to rest. Chen Yang smiled to himself. The thought of visiting a pretty girl's home made him feel a little curious. Li Lu opened the door, but after stepping inside, Chen Yang's expectations immediately disappeared. The room was simple and in rough condition. Looking around, he awkwardly thought that her lifestyle was definitely minimal. Li Lu told him to sit first. Chen Yang sat down on the bed and quietly acknowledged her. While pouring water into a cup, Li Lu told him not to underestimate Gray Rat District D just because it was a small camp. Handing him the cup, she explained that even a small sparrow still has all its organs, meaning the camp had everything it needed to survive. Then she leaned closer and confidently told him to simply say what he wanted to trade food for. As long as the camp had it, she guaranteed she could help him find it. Chen Yang thought for a moment before snapping his fingers. He said he needed gold and silver and asked whether she knew what those were. Li Lu stared at him in surprise and asked why he wanted that useless stuff. Chen Yang paused. To him, that kind of trash was worth a fortune back in his world. Li Lu then explained that before the Great Cataclysm, gold and silver had indeed been valuable. But now people couldn't eat gold. In the current world, survival mattered more than wealth, and everything operated through barter instead. Chen Yang cleared his throat and explained that since this was their first deal, what mattered most was not what they traded this time, but building mutual trust and creating opportunities for future exchanges. Then he opened his bag. Inside were all kinds of snacks and convenience store food. The moment Li Lu saw it, her eyes widened and she let out an excited reaction. Smiling, Chen Yang showed her the contents and told her that if the deal succeeded, 1/10 of everything in the bag would belong to her in addition to her commission. Li Lu moved closer and stared at the food. 1/10 of that amount was already enough to make her excited. Still, she hesitated and sat beside him on the floor. She admitted that even if the purpose was building trust, trading valuable food for completely useless gold seemed like an enormous loss. Chen Yang handed the bag over and simply told her to do as he said. Then he stood up, smiled, and told her he was leaving everything in her hands and would wait there for her return. Li Lu immediately clenched her fist and confidently promised she would not betray his trust. She picked up her gun and, before leaving the apartment, assured him she would return as quickly as possible. Watching her leave, Chen Yang quietly became nervous. Those snacks had cost him his last 100 yuan. This deal absolutely had to work. After she left, he lay down on the bed. With no internet and no signal, boredom quickly set in. While looking around the room, something caught his attention. Pieces of newspaper had been pasted onto the wall. Curious, he sat up and walked over to read them. As he looked through the clippings, he noticed the date. Year 2235, Common Era. His expression changed. Then he saw the headlines. Great Cataclysm. Nuclear bombs. He continued reading. Gene pollution. Zombies roaming everywhere. Time passed. About an hour later, after reading more of the newspaper fragments, Chen Yang finally understood. This world was actually Blue Star 200 years in the future. What Li Lu called the Great Cataclysm had been a nuclear war. Thousands of nuclear bombs had wiped out half the population and completely altered the planet's ecosystem, turning it into the wasteland it had become. After realizing this, Chen Yang became even more shocked. What he had crossed wasn't space, it was time. At that moment, the apartment door opened. Li Lu walked in with a bright smile. She announced that she was back and dropped a bag in front of him. She explained that there wasn't much gold or silver left in the camp, and that this was almost everything they could gather. Since nobody considered it useful anymore, no one bothered collecting it. Chen Yang looked at the bag quietly for a moment. Then he walked over with a smile. He opened it and found it filled with gold bars. For a second, he stared in silence. Then his eyes lit up and he excitedly blurted out that they were unbelievably shiny. Chen Yang picked up one of the gold bars from the bag and stared at it with shining eyes. Grinning to himself, he dramatically thought that if this wasteland had not given birth to someone like Chen Yang, an endless dark age would never come to an end. As he admired the gold, Li Lu walked closer with a smile and reminded him that the food he had traded was worth far more than the gold and silver they collected. So she had made an additional decision on his behalf. Holding a small vial in her hand, she explained that she had exchanged part of the value for a Tier 1 enhancement potion. She told him it was only the lowest grade, but the purity was high enough to inject directly without any risk. Chen Yang looked at the vial in confusion and repeated the name. Li Lu explained that he was obviously just an ordinary person and not an enhanced human. Once he used it, handling a few low-level zombies would no longer be difficult. Leaning slightly closer, she handed him the potion and reminded him that danger existed everywhere in the wasteland and luck alone would not keep him alive forever. Chen Yang accepted it and awkwardly cleared his throat. Trying to maintain his image, he explained that his organization was actually very powerful and that they were generally safe while traveling. The only troublesome part was conducting trades. Still, he thanked her. After putting away the potion, Chen Yang closed the bag. Smiling, he said their first trade had gone very smoothly and that he would return for now. Picking up the bag, he told Li Lu that he would come again tomorrow and settle her monthly salary first thing. Then he left. Li Lu quietly watched him disappear, thinking about how he could travel alone across the wasteland without encountering danger. She felt that he truly was full of secrets. But she quickly took out a packet of spicy strips. Opening it, she smiled and thought that in a wasteland like this, everyone had secrets. As long as he could keep supplying food, nothing else really mattered. Taking another bite, she happily admitted that it really was delicious. Meanwhile, after reaching a quiet place with nobody nearby, Chen Yang looked around and decided this spot was perfect. Without wasting time, he activated the ring. The teleportation process immediately began. In the next moment, he returned to his room. Opening the bag and seeing the gold still inside, he stared for a second before breaking into laughter. He took out one of the gold bars and looked at it excitedly. The gold was still there. This wasn't a dream. Excitement quickly filled his thoughts. As long as he took the gold to a shop and exchanged it for cash, he could become rich. His imagination immediately ran wild. He pictured himself surrounded by mountains of money, living a luxurious life while being served in comfort. With growing excitement, Chen Yang became convinced that he was finally about to climb straight to the peak of life. Snapping out of his imagination, Chen Yang took several gold bars and the enhancement potion out of the bag. Thinking practically again, he reminded himself that he needed to control how much gold he exchanged at one time or he would attract too much attention. He hid the remaining bag under his bed. There was no believable way to explain where so much gold had come from. Letting out a relieved breath, he finally relaxed. But then his eyes drifted toward the potion. Picking it up, he stared at it and wondered whether he should actually use it. After thinking for a moment, he admitted that Li Lu had a point. His body was far too weak in the apocalypse. He couldn't even deal with an ordinary zombie. If he wanted to survive in the wasteland, strengthening himself had to come first. Still, he looked at the vial with suspicion. The thing didn't even come with instructions. What a terrible user experience. After hesitating briefly, he decided to stop overthinking. With determination, he injected the potion into his wrist. The neon blue liquid flowed into his veins. He pulled out the injector and waited. Nothing happened. Confused, he muttered that he didn't feel any different. Then suddenly, his heartbeat exploded. A sharp pain erupted from inside his chest. Startled, he instinctively crushed the empty injector in his hand. The pain intensified. It felt as if every muscle in his body was being torn apart. Trembling, he collapsed onto his knees. He tried supporting himself with his arms, but couldn't endure it, and ended up pressing one hand and his forehead against the floor while clutching his chest. The pain became unbearable. Inside his body, his genes seemed to begin fusing. His muscles started expanding on their own. Moments later, his clothes stretched and tore apart as his physique rapidly grew larger and more muscular. Unable to suppress it, Chen Yang shouted repeatedly in pain. After some time, the transformation finally slowed. The pain gradually faded. Breathing heavily, he grabbed the edge of a desk and slowly pulled himself to his feet. Looking down at himself, he asked in disbelief if it was finally over. Then he turned toward the mirror. The reflection shocked him. Staring at his transformed body, he wondered if it really belonged to him. Looking at his arms with growing excitement, he thought these muscles could compete with Arnold's. He struck a bodybuilding pose and noticed something else. At least his head hadn't turned into something strange. For something from the wasteland, the effect was unbelievably strong. Still admiring himself, another thought crossed his mind. Li Lu had said this was only the lowest tier. If higher tiers existed, would they turn him into something like One Punch Man? Just then, someone knocked on the door. A voice called out and asked if Chen Yang could open it. He answered and walked over. Opening the door, he found a beautiful white-haired girl standing outside. It was Shuya, a D-list actress, and his roommate. Entering in a hurry while slipping off her heels, she apologized and explained that she had forgotten her key. Chen Yang smiled and told her there was no need to be so polite since they were roommates. But after stepping inside and getting a proper look at him, Shuya suddenly froze. Then her face gradually turned red as she stared at Chen Yang's newly muscular body. Shuya suddenly became unusually flustered. Chen Yang looked at her in confusion and asked what was wrong. Without answering immediately, Shuya reached out and touched his bare chest. Blushing slightly, she admitted that she had never noticed before that he was built like this. Then she leaned a little closer and asked if he had found out her audition failed today and intentionally appeared like this to comfort her. Chen Yang immediately panicked. His expression changed at once as he hurriedly denied it. Then he suddenly realized the problem. He had forgotten to put on clothes. Embarrassed, he rushed back toward his room while trying to explain himself. After shutting the door behind him, Chen Yang stood there in silence. With a worried expression, he became convinced that Shuya would definitely think he was some kind of pervert now. But after a moment, he forced himself to stop thinking about it. There was no point overanalyzing. Right now, selling the gold bars mattered more. Soon after, the scene shifted to the city streets. Carrying the bag containing the gold, Chen Yang walked forward. As he moved, he suddenly realized something strange. The weight in his hands felt almost non-existent. Then his eyes caught a signboard far in the distance. To his surprise, he could read every word on it clearly despite being hundreds of meters away. A moment later, faint sounds reached his ears. As he focused, the distant noise became clearer. He realized he could hear conversations happening far away. His hearing had improved significantly too. Excitement immediately appeared on his face. The enhancement potion hadn't simply made him stronger, it had upgraded his physical abilities in a very complete way. That realization surprised him even more. Even after a nuclear war, the technology of the wasteland was still 200 years ahead of modern civilization. Clenching his fist, Chen Yang became increasingly excited. The value hidden in that world was definitely worth exploring further. After some time, he arrived near a gold shop. Standing outside, he thought carefully. Large jewelry chains probably wouldn't accept gold from unknown sources. A privately owned shop would be safer. After making up his mind, he confidently walked inside. As he entered, a black-haired receptionist greeted him politely. Chen Yang approached the counter and asked whether the owner was available. He explained that he had a deal he wanted to discuss directly. The receptionist smiled politely and told Chen Yang that he could simply explain what he needed. Instead of answering, Chen Yang placed his bag on the table. Then he opened it and took out 3 gold bars. Looking at the receptionist calmly, he said he didn't think she was authorized to make decisions on something like this. The moment she saw the gold bars, her expression changed. She stared at them in disbelief and reacted in shock at the amount of gold. Chen Yang simply smiled and asked what she meant. Growing noticeably nervous, she immediately pointed in another direction and politely asked him to follow her. The scene shifted to the meeting room of Lin's gold shop. After entering, Chen Yang was greeted by a black-haired, heavy-set man in a suit. With a friendly smile, the man introduced himself as Lin Tao, the owner of the shop, and asked how he should address him. Chen Yang replied that his surname was Chun. The two exchanged handshakes and greeted each other politely. Lin Tao then invited Chen Yang to take a seat. After sitting down, Chen Yang placed the 3 gold bars onto the table. The moment Lin Tao saw them, his eyes lit up. He asked if Chen Yang intended to sell those gold bars. Chen Yang confirmed it with a smile. Lin Tao picked up one of the bars and explained that since the total amount was fairly large, he would need to test the purity using professional equipment. He asked if Chen Yang minded. Chen Yang relaxed in his chair and agreed without hesitation. While lifting the coffee placed on the table, he thought to himself that gold and silver were practically worthless in the post-apocalyptic wasteland. Nobody there would bother creating fake gold. They could inspect it however they wanted. Lin Tao began testing the bars one by one. The instrument displayed the results. 99.99% purity. Several bars were tested again together. The result remained the same. Seeing the readings, Lin Tao became internally shocked. Every single bar was pure 24-karat gold. Chen Yang calmly asked for the result. Lin Tao raised 4 fingers and explained that the quality was excellent. He could offer a recycling price of 400 yuan per gram. The moment Chen Yang heard the number, his grip tightened. The glass in his hand cracked instantly. His mind immediately started calculating. 400 yuan per gram. 1 bar weighed 1 kilogram. That meant 400,000 per bar. 3 bars. 1.2 million. After finishing the calculation, Chen Yang looked up with excitement and repeated the number in disbelief. A full 1.2 million. Lin Tao looked at Chen Yang and explained that the offer stood, but official purchase receipts would still be required. Chen Yang smiled and admitted he didn't have any receipts. Still, he assured him that the source was completely clean and there would be no trouble. Lin Tao remained cautious. He explained that words alone weren't enough, and accepting such a large batch at once meant taking on considerable risk. Chen Yang placed the cracked glass back onto the table. Then he stood up and called out to Boss Lin. He said he preferred straightforward business and suggested skipping unnecessary bargaining. Walking closer, he told Lin Tao to simply name the amount he was actually willing to pay. If the price was acceptable, they would make the deal. If not, he casually took the gold bar back from Lin Tao's hand and said they could just treat this meeting as making a new friend. Lin Tao paused before quickly changing his tone. With a smile, he said that in that case, he would take a loss and offer a recycling price of 280 yuan per gram. For all 3 bars together, the total would be 840,000 yuan. Chen Yang immediately smiled and agreed. That sounded much more reasonable. Sometime later, the transaction was completed. A notification appeared on Chen Yang's phone. Bank transfer received. 840,000 yuan. After confirming the payment, Chen Yang placed the gold bars back onto the table and said it had been a pleasure doing business. The two shook hands. Lin Tao told him that if he had more goods to move in the future, they could continue working together. Chen Yang replied that he would think about it. After leaving the gold shop, Chen Yang walked down the street with a smile. Just 3 gold bars had already earned him more than 800,000 yuan. The thought made him even more excited. If he sold all the gold hidden under his bed before he finished imagining it, he practically started celebrating internally. For the first time in a long while, Chen Yang felt like he had finally become rich. The scene then shifted to the apartment complex where Chen Yang lived. Inside the apartment, another brown-haired girl hurried out of her room. She was wearing a yellow jacket over a white hoodie, blue shorts, glasses, and had a piece of toast in her mouth. This was Zhou Dandan, an office worker and Chen Yang's flatmate. In a rush, she searched around while asking where her phone was. Shuya answered and told her it was on the coffee table. Zhou Dandan grabbed the purple phone and immediately rushed toward the exit. But right at the door, she ran into Chen Yang. Chen Yang smiled and asked why she was in such a hurry. Chen Yang stood near the entrance with Zhou Dandan while Shuya walked over. Shuya sighed and explained that there was no need to ask. Zhou Dandan had only just gotten home, and her boss had already called her back for overtime again. Chen Yang spread his hands and smiled. What bad timing. He had just made a small fortune today and had been planning to treat both of them to dinner. Already moving toward the exit, Zhou Dandan complained that Shuya had better eat her portion too. Shuya gave her a thumbs up and agreed immediately. But just before leaving, Zhou Dandan suddenly turned back. Pointing at Chen Yang, she jokingly warned him not to make any moves on Shuya while she wasn't around. Before she could continue, Chen Yang smiled helplessly and asked if he really looked like that kind of person. Zhou Dandan laughed, waved at both of them, and told them to have fun before leaving. After the door closed, Shuya looked at Chen Yang and asked where President Chen planned to take her tonight. Chen Yang casually suggested Regal Grand Hotel. Shuya froze. Looking at him in disbelief, she reminded him that it was a 5-star hotel. Chen Yang simply replied that he wasn't joking. Then, while walking back toward his room, he told her he would see her tonight. After entering his room, Chen Yang immediately knelt beside his bed and reached underneath. He pulled out the bag of gold, taking out more bars. He reminded himself that he needed to hurry and cash out the remaining dozen or so today. The scene shifted to the city. Chen Yang visited one gold shop after another. At one shop, after completing the transaction, he shook hands with the owner and politely said it was a pleasure doing business. At another shop, an elderly owner shook his hand and told him to take care. At yet another store, a green-haired owner waved goodbye and said she looked forward to his next visit. After several rounds of selling, Chen Yang checked his phone. His account balance displayed for million yuan. Seeing the number, excitement immediately returned. With a smile, he thought that the apocalypse truly deserved appreciation. Just then, his phone started ringing. Looking at the screen, he saw the caller ID. Guangxi. Chen Yang picked up and joked, asking why he was suddenly calling and whether he missed him. Meanwhile, Guangxi sat in his office working. On the call, he asked Chen Yang why he hadn't mentioned losing his job. Then he asked if Chen Yang still had enough money for rent and offered to lend him some savings first. Chen Yang suddenly stopped walking. Then he replied confidently that his brother Yang wasn't short on money anymore. But immediately afterward, his expression changed. He asked who told him about losing his job and wondered if the news had already spread that far. Guangxi paused and set aside his work. Then he explained that it was actually Feng Jia, Chen Yang's ex. She had said it wouldn't be appropriate for her to contact him directly, so she asked Guangxi to check on him instead. Hearing that name, Chen Yang stopped for a moment and repeated in surprise, "Her?" On the phone, Guangxi smiled and asked Chen Yang whether Feng Jia might still care about him. If that was the case, why had they broken up? Chen Yang gave an awkward smile and explained that Feng Jia's mother wanted her daughter to date someone who could afford to buy a house in Dijin. And considering his family situation, he simply couldn't meet that expectation. After hearing that, Guangxi became irritated. He said that hearing stories like that only strengthened his determination to stay single. After letting out a breath, Chen Yang asked something that had been bothering him. He wanted to know how Feng Jia even found out about his situation. Since the breakup, he hadn't contacted her at all. Guangxi's tone turned more annoyed. He explained that it was Jiang Jinglong who told her. Everyone knew Jiang Jinglong had always been interested in Feng Jia. And according to what he heard, Jiang Jinglong had even bought shares in Chen Yang's former company and specifically arranged for Chen Yang to be fired just to target him. Hearing that, Chen Yang's expression slowly darkened. Then he coldly muttered that now he finally understood. Sensing the mood change, Guangxi quickly told him to calm down and not do anything reckless. Chen Yang immediately denied it. What did Guangxi take him for? Was he really that kind of person? Hearing that answer, Guangxi finally relaxed and said he would hang up for now. Chen Yang smiled and said goodbye before ending the call. But the moment the call disconnected, his expression changed again. Quietly, he muttered that Jiang Jinglong really was shameless. Then he checked the time. His eyes widened. It was getting late. He immediately hurried toward the hotel. Soon he arrived outside. Looking around, he remembered Shuya had said she was almost there. He wondered where she was. At that moment, a luxurious black car stopped nearby. The door opened. Shuya stepped out with a smile and apologized for making him wait. Nearby pedestrians immediately noticed her. Some whispered in surprise and wondered whether she was a celebrity because she looked stunning. Shuya walked over and asked Chen Yang why he was standing there in a daze. Chen Yang looked at her and unconsciously blushed. They had been sharing an apartment for 3 months, yet he had never realized she was this beautiful. Shuya gave a charming smile and explained that since he was treating her to such an expensive place, she couldn't let him lose face. Then she asked whether she looked presentable enough. Before Chen Yang could respond, Shuya reached out and held one of his wrists with both hands. Chen Yang instantly became flustered. Staring at her nervously, he asked what she was doing. Shuya gently pulled Chen Yang along and told him to come with her. Seeing how stiff he looked, she smiled and explained that this was just basic social etiquette and asked why he was getting so nervous. After entering the hotel, the two were shown to their seats. A waiter arrived and handed both of the menu cards before asking them to place their order. Shuya thanked him and began looking through the menu. But after seeing the prices listed inside, she became internally shocked. The prices here were outrageous. Meanwhile, Chen Yang barely looked at the menu. He handed it back to the waiter and calmly ordered all 3 signature dishes along with 2 treasure crabs. The waiter nodded and told them to wait a moment. Shuya immediately leaned closer and lowered her voice. She reminded him that the 2 crabs alone cost 1,000 yuan and asked why he would order something so expensive. Chen Yang blushed slightly but tried to stay relaxed. He told her not to worry because he was doing pretty well financially right now and could at least afford 2 crabs. Shuya looked at him suspiciously. She reminded him that he had been living on cheap takeout recently and told him not to pretend to be rich in front of her. Chen Yang raised both hands and finally gave an explanation. According to him, his family back home had received compensation from a demolition project. Hearing that, Shuya leaned over again, grabbing him lightly around the neck in a playful way. She joked that if that was true, then she wouldn't feel guilty anymore. This was simply robbing the rich to feed the poor. Chen Yang immediately started coughing awkwardly. Sometime later, the scene shifted outside the hotel. The meal was over, and the two walked out together. Shuya was still holding onto Chen Yang's arm with both hands, just like before. While walking, Chen Yang suggested finding another place afterward for a second round. Shuya smiled and refused. The meal had been too good, but she was completely full. At that moment, someone walked out of the hotel. A voice called out loudly, "Jiang Jinglong." Pointing directly at Chen Yang, he asked what he was doing there. Chen Yang looked surprised by the sudden encounter. Then his expression became irritated. He commented that it really was an unlucky coincidence. Dijin was huge, yet simply going out for a meal was enough for them to run into each other. Jiang Jinglong glanced toward the hotel behind him and arrogantly asked whether Chen Yang actually thought he belonged in a five-star place like this. Chen Yang immediately fired back. He asked whether Regal Grand belonged to Jiang Jinglong's family too, and whether he planned to throw him out just like before. Jiang Jinglong smiled. Then he casually asked if that meant Chen Yang already knew why he got fired. Standing nearby, Shuya looked confused and quietly asked Chen Yang whether this was his friend. Jiang Jinglong finally noticed her. The moment he saw her, his expression shifted. He realized Chen Yang was out having dinner with someone attractive and immediately started thinking that this was the perfect chance. He wanted to expose Chen Yang as a broke loser in front of her, and if possible, take advantage of the situation himself. Jiang Jinglong walked closer and turned to Shuya. With a confident smile, he warned her not to let Chen Yang fool her. He introduced himself as Chen Yang's college classmate and claimed he knew him better than anyone. According to him, Chen Yang was broke, had just lost his job, and was barely managing rent. He argued that bringing someone to a place like this could only mean Chen Yang was spending everything he had to appear wealthy. First, he said, people like that impressed others with appearances, then eventually left them losing both feelings and money. Hearing that, Chen Yang immediately became irritated. He asked whether Jiang Jinglong really thought everyone was as shameless as he was. Shuya simply smiled. Looking at Jiang Jinglong, she asked whether he was kindly warning her. Jiang Jinglong proudly confirmed it. Then he introduced himself properly and declared that nothing upset him more than seeing beautiful women get deceived. Changing his tone, he pulled out a business card and handed it toward her. He mentioned that his company was currently searching for a brand ambassador and asked whether she was interested. She didn't even take it. With visible annoyance, she brushed his hand aside and the card slipped away. Then she directly told him she wasn't interested. Jiang Jinglong kept smiling and tried again. He emphasized that the position came with excellent pay and benefits and asked her to reconsider. Shuya's expression cooled. She reached out and grabbed Chen Yang's jacket. Then she calmly told Jiang Jinglong no, because she was Chen Yang's girlfriend and she didn't appreciate hearing someone insult her boyfriend. She added that with a chairman like him, that company would probably go bankrupt sooner or later. Jiang Jinglong's face immediately darkened. He angrily started responding, but couldn't finish. Ignoring him completely, Chen Yang and Shuya turned and walked away. Chen Yang looked at her and gave a thumbs up. Smiling, he commented that she was surprisingly good at creating drama. Shuya leaned closer and quietly reminded him that she was an actress. Then she held his shoulder with both hands and, still acting the part, told him to come on and not waste time dealing with trash. Behind them, Jiang Jinglong stood frozen. Clenching his fist, he angrily muttered that she had to be blind to choose someone like Chen Yang. At that moment, another voice appeared. Feng Jiao walked out of the hotel. Then she called out to Jiang Jinglong and asked if he could take her home. Jiang Jinglong immediately changed expressions. He told her there was no need to rush. Instead, he revealed that he had already booked them a table at a bar and suggested they continue the night with a few more drinks. Feng Jiao looked at Jiang Jinglong and calmly told him that there was no need. She wasn't interested. Then, while walking away, she added that she would transfer her share of tonight's dinner bill later. Jiang Jinglong froze. Before he could respond, a car arrived. Feng Jiao walked over without hesitation. Jiang Jinglong quickly followed after her and repeatedly called out to her. But she ignored him. She got into the car, shut the door, and the vehicle drove away. Left standing alone, Jiang Jinglong's expression darkened. Clenching his fist, he angrily complained that she worked at his company and still dared to act so distant and untouchable around him. Meanwhile, the scene shifted. On a bridge in the city, Chen Yang and Shuya walked side by side. Shuya broke the silence and complained that the guy earlier had been incredibly annoying. Chen Yang simply nodded. After a while, the two stopped near the railing. Looking out ahead, Chen Yang said that because of running into Jiang Jinglong tonight, he had realized something. Shuya looked confused and asked what he meant. Chen Yang explained that after suddenly having money in his hands, he kept thinking about what kind of field he should enter if he wanted to build something meaningful. Then he raised his fist toward the night sky. He finally made his decision. He was going to start his own game company and completely surpass Jiang Jinglong. Shuya looked at him in disbelief. She reminded him that starting a company was extremely risky and told him not to make decisions impulsively. Chen Yang simply smiled and told her to relax and wait to see what happened. The scene shifted again, back to the apartment complex where Chen Yang lived. While taking a shower, Chen Yang continued thinking. Going to the wasteland and exchanging resources for gold might work for now, but once his assets grew larger, people would inevitably start paying attention. Eventually, someone might investigate. After leaving the bathroom, he continued organizing his thoughts. If he wanted long-term stability, he needed a legitimate explanation for his growing wealth. In this world, that meant building a business of his own. He sat down at his desk and looked at his computer. Then his thoughts returned to the wasteland. Beyond physical resources, the greatest advantage of that world was its technology. According to Li Lu, only 10 years had passed since the Great Cataclysm. That meant the technological foundation of civilization probably hadn't completely disappeared yet. If he searched carefully, he could likely find specialists and experts across many industries. And based on the wasteland standards, just 15 packs of spicy strips per month was enough to hire talented people to work for him. A smile slowly appeared on his face. With technology that was 200 years ahead, creating a few revolutionary games should be easy. The scene shifted to the next morning. Chen Yang received a phone call. The person on the other end informed him that his company registration had been submitted and that once approval was complete, he would receive a text message. Chen Yang thanked them for the help. After ending the call, he organized his next steps. He decided to leave the registration process to the agency. Now the priority was hiring staff. Before that, he needed to stock up on food and make another trip to the wasteland. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to a shopping mall. While shopping, Chen Yang carefully reconsidered his approach. Since that world existed 200 years in the future, bringing packaged snacks repeatedly wasn't a good idea. Looking at the production details on a bag of potato chips, he realized that if someone with bad intentions noticed dates or manufacturing information, it could create unnecessary trouble. Changing his plan, he pushed his cart toward the fresh food section and stopped at the meat counter. The employee greeted him and asked what he needed. Chen Yang calmly asked for 25 kilograms of pork. The employee stared at him in surprise and repeated the amount in disbelief. Half an hour later, Chen Yang looked at the trolley, now piled high with supplies. That should be enough. He planned to take everything. 20 kilograms of potatoes, 20 kilograms of corn, 20 heads of Chinese cabbage, along with the rest of the supplies. The scene shifted again, back to Chen Yang's apartment. Carrying the large boxes into his room, he placed them down and let out a breath. Even with his enhanced physique, carrying this much weight wasn't difficult. But moving supplies back and forth like this felt extremely inefficient. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he thought further. Handling small quantities was manageable. But once his company existed and he had dozens or even hundreds of people depending on supplies, how was he supposed to transport everything? At that moment, the ring suddenly began glowing. Chen Yang paused. Confused, he looked at it. The light spread from the ring toward the boxes. Then, the boxes disappeared. Chen Yang froze. Looking around in shock, he wondered what had just happened. His gaze slowly returned to the ring. A thought appeared in his mind. Narrowing his eyes, he focused on it. Then he sensed something. The food hadn't vanished. It had been stored somewhere inside the ring. His eyes widened. Excited, he realized his guess had been correct. The supplies were inside the ring. To test it again, he spoke a command. Store. The ring activated and absorbed the boxes once more. Then he gave another command. Retrieve. Instantly, the boxes reappeared. Looking at them, Chen Yang became excited. So it really was a storage space. The ring didn't just allow him to travel to the wasteland. It could store items too. Overcome with excitement, Chen Yang grabbed the ring and repeatedly kissed it. Looking at it with satisfaction, he joked that just when he needed help, it handed him a pillow. As expected, its service was unbeatable. Then he raised his hand and gave the command, off to the apocalypse. Within seconds, the teleportation activated. The next moment, he returned to the post-apocalyptic world. After arriving, he activated the ring again. The food boxes appeared in front of him. Looking at them, Chen Yang reminded himself that he still couldn't reveal this ability to anyone. To avoid suspicion, he decided to continue carrying things manually whenever he visited Li Lu. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to Li Lu's room. She sat quietly holding the spicy strip packet. Only traces of oil and seasoning remained inside. She dipped a finger into the leftover flavoring and looked at the shiny layer coating her fingertip. Then she tasted it. Immediately, she closed her eyes and enjoyed the flavor. Quietly, she admitted to herself that she really wanted another pack. but she quickly forced herself to stay rational. Properly sealed, long-lasting food was an extremely precious resource. Looking at the remaining spicy strips, she reminded herself again that food like this could become life-saving in desperate situations. If rationed carefully, even one pack could keep someone alive for over a week. Then another thought struck her. Chen Yang had traded such valuable food for a pile of useless gold. Her expression slowly changed. Any organization with abundant food wouldn't be lacking in members. If Chen Yang really wasted resources like that, wouldn't his organization punish him? The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she became. Eventually, she sat down helplessly on the bed. Quietly, she convinced herself that he probably wasn't coming back. Maybe everything had just been a brief and unrealistic dream. Then, the doors suddenly slammed open. Chen Yang walked in carrying large boxes of food. As soon as he entered, he casually called out for help moving everything. Li Lu froze. Then she immediately launched herself toward him in excitement. Shouting "Boss!" she jumped too enthusiastically and crashed into him. The two lost balance and fell together, along with the boxes. Li Lu landed sitting across his lap. Looking at him in disbelief, she said she couldn't believe he had really come back. Then her emotions broke through. She started crying and admitted she thought he had lied to her yesterday. Overwhelmed, she leaned closer. Blushing awkwardly, Chen Yang asked why he would lie. Still emotional, Li Lu explained. Yesterday, he exchanged food for useless gold. And the tier, one enhancement potion wasn't remotely worth an entire backpack of food. She had convinced herself that his organization would punish him. Chen Yang gently rubbed her head. He told her not to worry. His status inside the organization was very high. To him, a single pack of food meant nothing. Besides, he traded for gold because it had real value to him, so he hadn't lost anything. Li Lu quietly nodded and said she understood. Chen Yang immediately pointed at the mess around them and loudly told her that if she understood, she should help pick everything up because the food had rolled everywhere. As they started gathering supplies, Li Lu suddenly froze. She stared at one of the cabbages. Then she looked up in disbelief. Her voice rose in shock. Vegetables. Her eyes widened as she realized something unbelievable. Chen Yang's organization could actually grow vegetables. Looking at Li Lu's reaction, Chen Yang casually pointed out that it was only Chinese cabbage and asked whether it was really worth being that surprised. Li Lu immediately explained. After the Great Cataclysm, the soil became heavily polluted. Because of that, ordinary vegetables could no longer survive through cultivation. Hearing that, Chen Yang simply waved his hand and told her not to get emotional over it. If she liked them that much, he said he could just give all the vegetables to her since it wasn't a big deal. Li Lu froze. She repeated his words in disbelief and asked if he truly meant giving them to her. Holding the cabbage carefully, she explained that vegetables were far too valuable. She couldn't even estimate their real worth, so she couldn't accept them. She added that Chen Yang was a good person for offering something so precious, but since she worked for him, she only wanted to receive the salary she had earned. Hearing that, Chen Yang silently felt like he had just been labeled a good person. After thinking for a moment, he explained that he had already come up with a better salary system. Compared to spicy strips, actual food that could properly fill her stomach made more sense. He also told her that if she needed anything else in the future, she could ask him. In exchange, however, she needed to maintain high-quality service. Li Lu immediately promised she would do her best to meet his expectations. Chen Yang then clarified their relationship. From now on, they were employer and employee. Her role would be to act as his personal secretary and provide information whenever he needed it. Li Lu quickly agreed. Chen Yang then explained the reason he had brought meat and vegetables this time. He wanted her help recruiting more people. Li Lu looked surprised and asked whether he planned to expand his workforce. She also asked if there were any requirements. Chen Yang said loyalty came first. After that, special skills would be preferred. Li Lu thought for a moment before suggesting Gray Rat Town. She explained that around 10,000 survivors lived there. No matter what kind of specialists he needed, there was a good chance of finding them. That reminded Chen Yang of something. He asked about the relationship between Gray Rat District D and Gray Rat Town. Earlier, she had introduced their camp using that name. Li Lu explained that Gray Rat Town was the central hub. Around it were 12 smaller settlements named from District A to District L. All of them depended on Gray Rat Town to survive. Whenever they needed scarce supplies or trade opportunities, they went there. After understanding that, Chen Yang asked another question. He wanted to know whether there were programmers there, people who understood computer technology, especially game development. Li Lu looked confused when she heard the word computer. She asked whether he meant those primitive products from ancient times. Chen Yang awkwardly admitted that computers probably did sound ancient in this era. Then he asked whether finding someone with those skills would be difficult. Li Lu wasn't sure. She explained that even before the Great Cataclysm, traditional computers had gradually been replaced by Intel brains. Then she suddenly remembered something. There was someone in their settlement, a technical director from before the Cataclysm, who specialized in Intel brain technology. Excited, she grabbed Chen Yang's hand and urged him to hurry so she could introduce him. Chen Yang awkwardly reminded her that he could walk on his own. Later, as the two walked through the settlement, Chen Yang asked something that had been bothering him. Why did nobody lock their doors? Li Lu explained that everyone here was extremely poor. There was simply nothing valuable enough to steal. More importantly, survival in the wasteland depended on cooperation. Anyone caught stealing or damaging that trust would be expelled from every settlement. After walking a little farther, Li Lu stopped. She said they had arrived and that the person they wanted was inside. At that moment, a strange voice echoed from within. Someone was happily talking about meat and how delicious it would be. Then a loud explosion sounded. Chen Yang looked disturbed. Meanwhile, Li Lu calmly called out and said she wanted to speak with Uncle Wei. A moment later, a man came out. He greeted Li Lu and cheerfully said she had arrived at the perfect time because he had just caught a big one. Introducing himself proudly as a scientist, he added that once he finished processing it, he would share the 2 hind legs with her. Li Lu immediately became excited and happily accepted. Chen Yang looked completely confused. He asked what they were even talking about. When he looked closer, he realized it was a giant gray rat. Surprised, he asked whether it was some kind of mutated creature. Li Lu confirmed it. Besides zombies, this species of rat was one of the most common mutated creatures in the wasteland. Adult ones could grow to half a meter long and were also one of the main food sources for survivors. After explaining, Li Lu turned to Uncle Wei and said she actually came for another reason. She introduced Chen Yang as her current boss. Then she explained that Chen Yang wanted to recruit people and that the offer compensation was extremely generous. Uncle Wei walked closer and looked Chen Yang up and down. Then he skeptically asked what kind of generous payment someone that young could possibly offer. For a moment, he even wondered whether Chen Yang was actually running a scam. Chen Yang stepped forward and calmly explained that he was looking for technical talent in the cerebral technology field. He stated that anyone who met his requirements would receive a monthly salary of 30 caddies of rice and flour along with 10 caddies of raw meat. Uncle Wei froze. To make sure he heard correctly, he asked whether Chen Yang truly meant rice and flour. Chen Yang confidently confirmed it. He even added that if Uncle Wei had concerns, he could advance the salary up front. The scientist stared at him in disbelief and asked whether he was serious. Li Lu quickly stepped in and reassured him. She explained that as long as the boss approved it, she could hand over the meat immediately. Uncle Wei suddenly laughed. If that was the case, then Mr. Chun had definitely found the right person. With complete confidence, he claimed that nobody in District D understood Intel brain technology better than him. But Chen Yang shook his head. He explained that Uncle Wei misunderstood. The work had nothing to do with Intel brains. What he actually wanted involved computers, the personal computers people used in ancient times. More specifically, he needed someone who understood that older technology. Uncle Wei paused. Repeating the word computers, he scratched his head and admitted he had heard of them. In his view, though, computers were extremely primitive. Their functions were limited and the user experience was poor, making them practically worthless. Chen Yang cut straight to the point. He only needed someone who understood the technology. The question was simple. Could Uncle Wei do it or not? Uncle Wei immediately started calculating internally. There was no way he could let monthly rice, flour, and raw meat slip away. His attitude instantly changed. He asked what exactly Chen Yang needed. Chen Yang explained that it was straightforward. He wanted someone who could use computers to program and develop software according to his requirements. Uncle Wei cautiously asked whether that meant manually manufacturing 0.4 nanometer chips. Chen Yang said there was no need. Then Uncle Wei asked whether he needed advanced AI core algorithm design. Again, Chen Yang said no. Hearing that, Uncle Wei visibly relaxed. He confidently declared there would be absolutely no problem. As long as the hardware conditions were sufficient, he could complete any programming requirements. However, he added one concern. Software built on computers could not directly run on Intel brains. So he asked what Chen Yang actually intended to use it for. Chen Yang calmly replied that he didn't need to worry about that. A good employee simply completed assigned tasks properly without asking unnecessary questions. Uncle Wei immediately nodded and said he understood. Chen Yang told him that was fine. He would solve the hardware problem himself. Then he asked whether Uncle Wei had any additional requirements, adding that food would definitely not be an issue. After thinking for a moment, Uncle Wei said having an Intel brain would help. He explained that complex code could first be developed on the Intel brain and then transferred onto computers afterward, making the entire process much faster. Even a low-performance model would be enough. Chen Yang nodded and said he would figure something out. Li Lu then suggested they leave. Uncle Wei waved goodbye and politely sent the boss off. Later, while walking outside, Chen Yang asked whether Intel brains were easy to obtain. Li Lu explained that District D didn't have any, but Gray Rat Town sold them. The only issue was that they were expensive. Chen Yang became slightly worried. He asked whether the food he brought today might not even be enough to buy one. Were Intel brains really that costly? Li Lu quickly shook her head. They were expensive for ordinary survivors, but for Chen Yang, buying even 100 of them wouldn't be a problem. That reminded Chen Yang of something else. He asked whether enhancement serums could also be purchased in Gray Rat Town. Li Lu immediately confirmed that they could. However, only Tier 1 and Tier 2 serums were available there. Higher tier serums had to be purchased through distribution points run by the Doctors Association in the Eastern region. Hearing that name, Chen Yang asked what the Doctors Association was. Li Lu explained that it was one of the strongest factions in the wasteland. All enhancement serums and healing potions were developed by them. Then she looked slightly surprised and asked whether he truly didn't know that. Chen Yang quickly explained that the organization he belonged to had always remained self-sufficient. Because of that, he knew very little about the outside world. Then he added that since she would already be traveling to Gray Rat Town, he also wanted her to visit the Doctors Association and purchase a batch of enhancement serums. Li Lu immediately agreed. Chen Yang then said he would return to his own world first and prepare a computer for Uncle Wei. He left the rest to her. Li Lu nodded. Before leaving, Chen Yang gave one final instruction. If she encountered danger during trading, she should abandon the supplies if necessary and prioritize her own safety. Li Lu stayed quiet for a moment before softly saying she understood. Later, as the sun set, Chen Yang returned to his room in the present world. Thinking about the agreement he had just made, he calculated that 30 caddies of rice and flour plus 10 caddies of raw meat was essentially enough to hire a technical director for less than 400 yuan a month. To him, the wasteland really felt like a gold mine of opportunities. Stretching comfortably, he joked to himself that ordinary people like him were finally living pretty well. Just then, Chen Yang noticed Zhou Dandan lying nearby while scrolling through her phone and thinking about what to order for dinner on Pinduoduo. Seeing how relaxed she looked made him feel slightly awkward, though he secretly found it amusing. Suddenly, Zhou Dandan noticed him. She immediately sat upright and told him to stop staring. Confused, she asked why he was home when she had looked into his room earlier and clearly hadn't seen anyone. Chen Yang casually replied that he had been home the entire time and suggested she might have remembered wrong. Then he said he had something to do and needed to head out, but promised to treat her to dinner later. With that, he quickly left. After the door closed, Zhou Dandan sighed and quietly complained to herself that men were all the same. Later, outside, Chen Yang remembered that Shuya had failed her audition earlier. Since she sometimes worked part-time at Computer City, he decided to buy a computer from her. When he arrived, he saw Shuya working at the reception desk. At that moment, a man was talking to her in an overly suggestive manner. He asked whether she had reconsidered his proposal and hinted that if she agreed, he would come back tomorrow to make the purchase. Shuya calmly rejected him. She told him they sold computers there and did not provide the kind of service he was implying. Chen Yang raised a hand and called the sales associate over, saying he had a few questions. Shuya quickly walked over and quietly admitted she was glad he showed up because that annoying guy had been bothering her nonstop. Chen Yang asked whether the customer was aggressively bargaining. Shuya shook her head. The man was assembling a custom computer, but kept trying to invite her out for drinks. Then she looked at Chen Yang and asked whether she really seemed like someone who would agree to that. Afterward, she asked what he actually came for and joked that he couldn't have come just to watch her suffer. Chen Yang said he came to build a computer. He reminded her that he had mentioned starting a game company and asked her to help assemble a top-spec desktop. He specifically requested the newest graphics card and the best available components. Shuya looked surprised. She reminded him that the highest-end setup in the shop cost around 100,000 yuan. He was opening a company, not building a gaming room. So why spend that much? Chen Yang explained that he needed a high-performance machine to test software limits. Shuya nodded and asked him to wait while she prepared everything. As she walked away, the fat man returned. Quietly, he convinced himself that he had to get her somehow. Then he turned to Chen Yang and asked what he planned to buy and what budget he had. Chen Yang simply pointed at the 100,000 yuan machine and said that was the one. The man stared in shock and asked whether he was serious. At that moment, Shuya returned carrying the packaged equipment. She told Chen Yang the total came to 130,000 yuan and asked how he wanted to pay. Seeing the transaction actually happening, the man became completely stunned. Chen Yang looked at him and jokingly asked whether he still wanted to invite him out for drinks. The man immediately backed off and hurried away. Meanwhile, back in Grey Rat Town, Li Lu walked through the streets carrying a large backpack. Several people nearby quietly watched her. One man approached and casually invited her to spend some time together. Li Lu directly refused, but the man continued moving closer and quietly commented to his companions that her backpack looked unusually full and probably contained something valuable. Li Lu immediately told him to back off. She slightly revealed the gun at her side and warned him not to force her to act. The moment the man saw the weapon, he stopped. Someone nearby muttered in surprise that she was carrying a gun. Li Lu continued walking calmly. Inside, however, she kept reminding herself not to show weakness. If she looked vulnerable for even a moment, those people would swarm her immediately. After walking farther, she finally reached a wasteland repair shop. Approaching the counter, she asked to buy an Intel brain. The owner explained that the basic model cost 15 kilograms of gray rat meat. Adding a plug-in module would cost another 5 kilograms. Li Lu calmly chose the basic version. The owner checked her goods and confirmed the amount was sufficient. Then he handed over the Intel brain and packed it into her bag. Before she left, he asked whether she wanted to trade for anything else and mentioned that he had plenty of valuable items available. Li Lu politely refused. After she walked away, one of the nearby men asked whether they should follow her. Another shook his head and said it wasn't worth the risk. As Li Lu continued through the streets, she quietly let out a breath. That had been close. If anyone had discovered the cabbage she was carrying, the entire settlement might have lost control. After traveling farther, she finally reached another location. Standing at the entrance, she quietly said she had arrived. Someone inside welcomed her and told her to look around. Inside the shop, many kinds of serums were displayed: meerkat serums, steel serums, bull serums, tier 1 enhancement serums, tier 2 enhancement serums, and even tier 3 enhancement serums. Li Lu looked over all of them calmly. Then she shook her head. These were still too basic. She wanted higher grade serums. The shopkeeper laughed and told Li Lu that high-grade serums were not something a young girl like her could afford. Without responding, Li Lu slowly took out the cabbage and showed it to him. The moment he saw it, his expression changed. His eyes widened in shock. Before Li Lu could react, the man suddenly moved. He rushed past her so quickly that even she was startled by his speed. Instinctively, she drew her weapon and pointed it at him, demanding to know what he was trying to do. The man calmly told her not to worry. He had no intention of robbing her. Besides, if he truly wanted to take it, her damaged gun wouldn't make any difference against a tier 9 enhanced human. Li Lu froze. She repeated the words in disbelief. Tier 9 enhancement? She couldn't understand why someone at that level would be assigned as a distributor in a remote place like Grey Rat Town. The man shrugged. In the wasteland, he said, impossible things happen all the time. Then he politely asked whether he could examine the cabbage more closely. After hesitating, Li Lu handed it over. The moment it reached his hands, his composure disappeared. He inspected it carefully and became visibly excited. The freshness, the color, it was unbelievable. This was a completely fresh Chinese cabbage untouched by radiation. To him, it felt like witnessing a miracle. Li Lu calmly said that if he wanted it, he should exchange it for something of equal value. The man immediately warned her not to raise the price excessively just because she had leverage. Li Lu remained calm. She reminded him that vegetables could no longer be cultivated in the wasteland. Someone like him should understand the value of something like this. The man nodded. He admitted that its rarity made it valuable. But he also said he didn't want his trading partner to become greedy. Li Lu replied that she had enough sincerity to make a fair deal. Hearing that, the man agreed. He pressed a hidden switch. A concealed compartment opened. Inside were several items. To show his sincerity, he presented a full set of enhancement serums from tier 1 through Tier 6. There is also a healing potion capable of treating illnesses caused by cellular mutation. Then he revealed the final item, a brand new carbon fiber power armor. Li Lu stared in shock and asked whether all of that belonged to her. The man immediately denied it. She could only choose 2 items. Then he pushed the choices forward. Confused, Li Lu asked why he introduced the armor if she couldn't take it. The man smiled. Naturally, that was for their second transaction. He pressed the button again, and the display closed. Then he explained that if she wanted the armor, she would need to bring more Chinese cabbage or other vegetables next time. Hearing that, Li Lu immediately became cautious. She wondered how he knew she had access to more vegetables. The man explained his reasoning. The cabbage was too perfect. There was no way it had appeared by accident. Any faction capable of producing vegetables surely wouldn't stop at a single cabbage. Li Lu quickly denied it. She claimed she simply found it inside ruins that existed before the Great Cataclysm. The man smiled. Even if such ruins existed, they wouldn't preserve only one cabbage. He told her to return and discuss it with her companions. For people surviving in the wasteland, vegetables were surely less practical than powerful armor. Li Lu thought about it. Then she agreed. She told him to keep the armor safe because she would return as soon as possible. After she left, the man quietly spoke to himself. Although he had been exiled to this miserable place after losing a power struggle, perhaps this exile would become an opportunity if he could obtain such valuable vegetables. Meanwhile, back in a modern world, Chen Yang stood beside a truck parked near a supermarket. One of the delivery workers told Mr. Chen that the goods had arrived and asked where everything should be unloaded. Chen Yang casually pointed toward a nearby storage area. As the workers carried the boxes, one quietly remarked that the meat alone was worth more than 20,000 yuan and wondered why anyone would buy so much at once. Another worker immediately told him not to worry about it and focus on his job. After unloading everything, they informed Chen Yang that he could contact them again anytime if he needed more supplies. Then the truck drove away. Chen Yang looked around the empty alley. Fortunately, there were usually no people there and no surveillance cameras. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know where to put so many supplies. Once he confirmed nobody was around, he activated the ring. In an instant, everything disappeared into storage. But after doing it, he became more thoughtful. This method wasn't sustainable. As the quantity of supplies increased, eventually someone would catch him. He even joked to himself that if he somehow ended up trending online again, his entire situation would be exposed. After thinking carefully, he came up with a temporary solution. Renting a private factory building would be safer. He also considered partnering with a food factory. That way, he would gain proper storage space and dramatically increase the variety of food he could bring into the wasteland. Thinking about it further, Chen Yang became more satisfied. Just as he expected, the ring's storage space existed in a state of complete stasis. No matter how much fresh food he stored inside, nothing would spoil. To test his theory, Chen Yang took out an ice cream from the ring and ate it. While enjoying it, his phone suddenly rang. The caller informed him that the registration process for Chen Yang Technology Company Limited had been completed. Chen Yang calmly acknowledged it. After ending the call, he smiled to himself. From this moment onward, his career had officially begun. Later, after returning home, he announced that he was back. Zhou Dandan immediately asked where he had disappeared to earlier since he left in such a hurry. Jokingly, she wondered whether he had gone for a job interview. Chen Yang said he had forgotten to mention something. He explained that he had started his own company, so there was no need to look for work anymore. Zhou Dandan looked at him suspiciously and asked whether he thought she was that easy to fool. Chen Yang insisted he wasn't lying and repeated the explanation about his hometown recently receiving demolition compensation. Hearing that, Zhou Dandan suddenly understood. That explained why he had suddenly become generous enough to treat them to such an expensive dinner the night before. She joked that demolition money really changed people. Then she sighed. Her family lived in a small county town, so even if their place got demolished, the compensation probably wouldn't amount to much. But then she noticed something odd. She asked why he was covering his nose. Chen Yang casually changed the subject and asked how much she currently earned. Zhou Dandan replied that after deductions, she only took home a little over 5,000 yuan a month. If the company didn't provide meals, she joked that she would have starved long ago. Then she dramatically collapsed onto the couch and wondered when ordinary people like them would finally experience becoming rich overnight. Chen Yang laughed. Getting rich overnight might be unrealistic, but he offered her something else. Would she consider joining his company? He offered 3 times her current salary, 15,000 yuan a month. Zhou Dandan immediately started calculating. If she saved carefully, she could put away almost 100,000 yuan in a year. Her imagination instantly ran ahead, hot pot, whenever she wanted, and new bags whenever she felt like it. Chen Yang smiled and asked whether that meant she agreed. Zhou Dandan quickly denied it. She hadn't agreed yet. What if his company collapsed in a few days? She told him to explain the company's situation first, so she could judge properly. While speaking, she even took out a pen and started making notes. Chen Yang explained that the company had just been registered today with a capital of 1 million yuan. Its main focus would be PC and mobile games. Zhou Dandan nodded while writing. Then she commented that, so far, the company still sounded unreliable. Aside from having money, there didn't seem to be anything else. A game company should at least have a roadmap and a technical team. Chen Yang confidently reassured her. That was exactly where their biggest competitive advantage would appear. Zhou Dandan continued analyzing things seriously. Right now, the most important issue was finding office space. After that, they would need to handle licenses and all kinds of applications. Then she suddenly picked up her bag and prepared to leave. Chen Yang asked where she was going. She casually replied that she was obviously going to resign. Hearing that, Chen Yang became a little emotional. Without saying it directly, she was already supporting him. Just then his phone rang. Chen Yang answered. After listening quietly for a moment, his expression changed. He said he understood and that he would leave immediately. Noticing his face turn pale, Zhou Dandan asked whether something had happened. Chen Yang explained that his grandfather had always been in poor health. Recently, he had been diagnosed with a serious illness. According to the doctor, he might only have around a month left. Chen Yang needed to return home and see him. He sincerely thanked Zhou Dandan. She waved it off and reminded him there was no need to be formal between roommates. Instead, she urged him to hurry home. Chen Yang immediately started packing. But while preparing to leave, another thought appeared. He absolutely couldn't accept this outcome. He remembered the enhancement serums from the Apocalyptic World. Maybe there was still a chance. Holding on to that possibility, he left determined to find a solution. Later, at Dihang High-Speed Rail Station, the station was crowded with travelers. Chen Yang stood among them waiting. Suddenly, a woman called out his name and asked whether he was Chen Yang. Turning around, he recognized her. It was Zhu Run. She smiled and said she hadn't expected to run into an old classmate. Thinking about it, she realized they hadn't seen each other in 7 years. Then she asked whether he was also heading back to Wanghai City. Chen Yang confirmed it. At that moment, the station announcement informed passengers that ticket inspection would begin shortly. Chen Yang suggested they walk and talk. Zhu Run agreed. As they headed toward the gate, she asked where his seat was. If possible, she wanted to switch seats with someone nearby so they could sit together. Chen Yang checked his ticket and explained that because he booked in a hurry, only business class seats were available. Zhu Run said they could just chat after arriving in Wanghai. But Chen Yang smiled and said there was no need. He already had another idea. Zhu Run looked confused and asked what he meant. Chen Yang asked Zhu Run to wait for a moment and walked over to a nearby staff member. Politely, he asked whether there were any empty seats left in business class. The staff member checked and confirmed there were. Out of the 4 business class seats in his row, only his ticket had been sold. Chen Yang asked her to move Zhu Run's ticket to the seat beside his and said he would cover the difference. Zhu Run stared at him in surprise. The staff member completed the change and handed her the new ticket, reminding her to keep it safe. Overjoyed, Zhu Run immediately ran over and hugged Chen Yang while thanking him excitedly. The sudden hug caught him off guard. Noticing his awkward reaction, she asked if something was wrong. Chen Yang quickly brushed it off and told her it was nothing. Later, after boarding the train, Zhu Run looked around curiously. It was her first time sitting in business class. She commented that it really was much more spacious than ordinary seating. Then she asked something she had been wondering about. She remembered that Chen Yang had already been working in Dihang and asked why he suddenly decided to return to Wanghai. Chen Yang explained that his grandfather was sick. Zhu Run gently placed a hand on his shoulder and told him not to worry too much. Medical science was very advanced now, and she believed his grandfather would recover. Chen Yang nodded. Then he asked why she had come to Dihang. Zhu Run explained that she came to promote her father's factory and look for business opportunities. That reminded Chen Yang of something. He remembered that her father owned a food factory. Zhu Run confirmed it. However, over the past 2 years, things had become increasingly difficult. Most customers only trusted major brands, leaving small factories struggling. Recently, They had barely been able to cover employee salaries. Hearing that, Chen Yang quietly realized something. He had already been looking for a long-term food supplier. Working with her family could not only help an old classmate, but also strengthen his own plans steadily. So he told Zhu Run that he might actually be able to help. She looked surprised and asked how. Chen Yang explained that he happened to be searching for a food factory to establish long-term cooperation and supply agreements. Zhu Run immediately asked if he was serious. Chen Yang confirmed it, but added that he would need to inspect the factory first. Zhu Run agreed without hesitation. Still, she remained curious. They had only graduated a few years ago, so she wondered why he suddenly had demand large enough to support long-term purchasing. Chen Yang casually explained that he had recently started his own company and that his business partners required food supplies. Zhu Run immediately suggested exchanging contact information. Chen Yang agreed. After exchanging contacts, they later shared a taxi. Chen Yang explained that he needed to visit his grandfather first, so the factory visit would likely wait a few days. Zhu Run said that was perfectly fine. When the taxi stopped, Chen Yang got out. Zhu Run waved goodbye. Watching him leave, she quietly thought that after so many years, unexpectedly meeting him and receiving his help felt strangely meaningful. Maybe it really was fate. At that moment, another car arrived. Someone called her name. She responded and walked over. The person inside was her father. After getting in, he immediately asked how the business discussions had gone. Zhu Run said there was one piece of bad news and one piece of good news. Her father asked to hear the bad news first. She admitted that she hadn't managed to secure any partnerships in Dihang. He sighed and then asked about the good news. Zhu Run explained that she unexpectedly met an old classmate named Chen Yang on the train. Coincidentally, he had demand for a large order and planned to visit their factory for inspection in a few days. Her father immediately became cautious. He warned her that old classmates suddenly offering major business could sometimes be scams and told her to stay careful. Meanwhile, at Wang'ai City People's Hospital, Chen Yang arrived. Someone greeted him. His father walked over and said Xiao Yang had finally returned. Chen Yang immediately asked about his grandfather's condition. His father explained that the old man had taken his medicine and fallen asleep. He told Chen Yang to rest for now and promised to call him once his grandfather woke up. Chen Yang nodded. Afterward, he walked into the bathroom. Standing there alone, he clenched his fists. He had to move quickly. No matter what, he had to find something that could save his grandfather. His thoughts immediately turned to the wasteland. Without hesitation, he activated the ring. Moments later, he arrived back in Grey Rat District D. Looking around, he wondered what he would do if Li Lu wasn't there. For a moment, he considered asking Uncle Wei instead, but he still wasn't sure whether he trusted him completely. In the end, he decided to go directly to Li Lu's house. Calling her name, he asked whether she was home. As he pushed open the door and stepped inside, he suddenly saw something unexpected. Startled, he immediately stepped back out and awkwardly said he would come back later. After some time, the two finally met again. Li Lu asked what urgent matter had brought her boss over so quickly. Chen Yang didn't waste time. He immediately asked the question that mattered most to him. With the current level of medical technology in their world, was terminal cancer still considered incurable? Li Lu answered without hesitation. Of course, cancer wasn't incurable anymore. She explained that after the Great Cataclysm, radiation spread across the planet, and cancer became more common than ordinary illness. If humanity had never solved it, people would have gone extinct long ago. Chen Yang immediately asked about the cure rate. Li Lu thought for a moment. Around 100 years earlier, the cure rate for the specialized treatment had already reached roughly 95%. But after the apocalypse began, nobody really continued keeping accurate statistics. Hearing that, Chen Yang quietly relaxed. At least his guess had been correct. He then asked whether that medicine could be purchased in Grey Rat Town. Li Lu shook her head. Not really. Chen Yang's expression immediately dimmed. But Li Lu quickly added something. The cellular disease serum developed by the Doctors Association also had the effect of treating cancer. The moment he heard that, his focus returned. Without hesitation, he said they needed to go to the Doctors Association immediately. Li Lu stopped him. Chen Yang impatiently asked what they were waiting for. He needed that serum as soon as possible. Instead of answering, Li Lu took out a serum and handed it over. She calmly explained that she had already exchanged for one. Chen Yang's expression changed instantly. Excited, he asked where she got it and whether she had gone to the Doctors Association. Li Lu nodded. Since he had previously told her to increase their strength as quickly as possible, She went there and traded using a cabbage. Chen Yang stared at her. Then he asked whether she had exchanged an entire cabbage just for one serum. Li Lu immediately denied it. That serum had only been included as a bonus. Then she asked him to follow her. Opening a bag, she revealed everything she had brought back. Inside, a complete set of Tier 1 through Tier 6 enhancement serums. Chen Yang repeated the words slowly in disbelief. Tier 1 through Tier 6. Seeing his reaction, Li Lu suddenly became nervous. She worried that he thought she made a bad trade. After all, vegetables were unimaginably valuable in the wasteland. But instead, Chen Yang suddenly became excited. He happily picked up the serums and started examining them one after another. In his mind, this deal had practically been completed using the price of a single cabbage. He even joked to himself that the Doctors Association must have reacted as if they had never seen vegetables before. At that moment, he realized something. He had achieved serum freedom. Li Lu watched quietly and asked whether he was unhappy with the exchange. Chen Yang immediately grabbed the bag. There was no way they lost. This had been an enormous profit. Excitedly, he told Li Lu she was practically his lucky star. Then, in excitement, he lifted her up. Li Lu smiled. As long as she could help the boss, she was satisfied. Chen Yang then reminded her of something important. From now on, they should keep trading at this exact rate. As long as the other side was willing, they should exchange for as many serums as possible. Li Lu nodded. That worked perfectly because the distributor had also shown strong interest in future cooperation. Chen Yang asked her to explain the distributor's situation in detail. After listening quietly, he thought for a moment. Then he slowly said he understood. So the man was a Tier 9 enhanced human. Li Lu carefully suggested that if he thought the risk was too high, they could always trade elsewhere. But Chen Yang shook his head. There was no need. Based on everything she described, this distributor, Jin Yin, actually seemed like an excellent partner. Li Lu asked why. Chen Yang explained that there were 3 reasons. First, as a Tier 9 enhanced human, Jin Yin had much higher authority and access. That meant better trading channels and access to advanced products like the biological armor she mentioned. Second, his objective was obvious. He wanted to return to the center of power within the Doctors Association. To do that, he would need enormous resources. That meant long-term cooperation benefited both sides. Li Lu nodded. That logic made sense. Then, Chen Yang mentioned the 3rd reason. Jin Yin was smart. Li Lu looked confused. Chen Yang explained. Jin Yin immediately realized she wasn't the real decision-maker. Yet he never pressured her to finalize anything. Instead, he intentionally left room for future negotiation. Li Lu lowered her head. She quietly admitted that she lacked experience and accidentally revealed too much. But Chen Yang gently lifted her head. Wiping away the tears in her eyes, he told her not to feel discouraged. She had already done extremely well. Li Lu smiled and thanked him. Chen Yang then picked up the suitcase full of serums and said he would take them for now. The rest could wait until tomorrow. But just before he left, Li Lu stopped him. She warned him not to inject another serum yet. Chen Yang asked why. Li Lu explained that there had to be intervals between enhancement serum injections. Normally, there should be about 3 days between Tier 1 and Tier 2. From Tier 2 to Tier 3, the waiting period should exceed a week. Chen Yang asked whether injecting them too quickly caused side effects. Li Lu immediately confirmed it. The body needed time to fully absorb the previous serum. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to handle the strain and could collapse. Chen Yang was startled. Then how was he supposed to know whether absorption was complete? Li Lu explained that people naturally felt it. Once absorption finished, the body would provide a very clear sensation. When the time came, he would understand. Chen Yang nodded. Then he told her he would see her tomorrow. Li Lu said goodbye to her boss. Soon afterward, Chen Yang returned to the modern world. Back at Wang'ai City People's Hospital, he appeared once again inside the bathroom stall. Holding the bag of serums, he couldn't hide his excitement. Everything had gone much more smoothly than he expected. To him, the wasteland truly was a treasure trove. Looking at the healing serum in his hand, he became convinced that his grandfather could still recover. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the hospital, a doctor was speaking with Chen Yang's father. She explained that her recommendation was based entirely on the current medical condition and asked him to consider it carefully. His father quietly said he would think about it. Just as the doctor prepared to leave, Chen Yang arrived and noticed her. Realizing she was likely his grandfather's attending physician, he immediately turned to his father and asked what she had said. His father sighed. The doctor had suggested transferring his grandfather to hospice care. Chen Yang looked confused. His father explained that it meant completing discharge procedures and bringing the old man home with medication to make his remaining time more comfortable. Hearing that, Chen Yang froze. So, they were basically telling his grandfather to go home and wait. His father explained further. The cancer had already spread throughout his body. Even the most expensive treatment would only extend his life by about 2 months. Dr. Han knew they were an ordinary family and couldn't realistically bear that cost, which was why she suggested discharge. Chen Yang quietly nodded. He understood. After a moment, his father suggested they visit grandfather first before handling the paperwork. Chen Yang agreed. Together, they entered the ward. His grandfather was still lying in bed, looking seriously ill. Seeing him, the old man weakly called his name. Chen Yang immediately answered and moved closer. Then his father quietly excused himself. He said he would ask about the discharge process and leave grandfather and grandson alone for a while. Even as he left, there were tears in his eyes. Watching his father try not to cry left Chen Yang unusually quiet. Once they were alone, another thought crossed his mind. Fortunately, ordinary hospital wards didn't have surveillance cameras. Without wasting time, he took out the mysterious serum. He told his grandfather that he had obtained a special medicine that might cure him. Then he asked whether he was willing to try. The old man became nervous when he saw the syringe. But after thinking about it, his condition couldn't realistically become much worse. To him, Chen Yang was simply trying to fulfill his filial duty. So he chose to trust him. And, quietly, he accepted the injection. The moment the medicine entered his body, something began to change. Chen Yang stood nearby and silently waited. If this failed, he had just injected his dying grandfather with an unknown substance from another world. After some time, something unexpected happened. Grandfather suddenly sat upright. Chen Yang immediately rushed over and asked whether he felt uncomfortable anywhere. But instead, the old man became excited. He said his body suddenly felt light. The pain, weakness, and discomfort, they all seemed to be gone. At that moment, Chen Yang finally released the breath he had been holding. It worked. The serum actually worked. Even after recovering, however, grandfather thought of something else. He pointed out that medicine, this miraculous, could become dangerous. If a dying person could recover like this, then once news spread, countless people would come searching for Chen Yang. Chen Yang reassured him. As long as they insisted it was simply a medical miracle, nothing should happen. Besides, only the two of them knew the serum existed. Grandfather finally relaxed. Giving him a thumbs up, he promised not to tell anyone. Chen Yang smiled and told him to rest. He would call a doctor for a new examination. Meanwhile, outside the ward, Chen Yang began thinking more seriously. Even though the recovery serum successfully saved his grandfather, he still couldn't commercialize something like this. He didn't understand how it worked. He couldn't guarantee stable production. More importantly, if the secret of traveling between worlds was exposed, the consequences would become impossible to control. While thinking, he noticed a faint glow from the ring. That reminded him of something important. The ring was irreplaceable. He wasn't. If someone discovered the secret, they would target him, not the ring. Because of that, he decided he needed to strengthen himself as quickly as possible before future dangers caught him unprepared. But before thinking about future problems, he had something more immediate to deal with. He hurried to the reception desk and urgently told the nurse to check on his grandfather in bed 43 because he had suddenly sat up. The nurse looked confused. She opened the medical records and read them aloud. Patient, Chen Jianjun, male, 69 years old, terminal liver cancer. Cancer had spread throughout the entire body. Loss of independent functioning. After hearing the report, Chen Yang insisted that he was telling the truth. The nurse still looked unconvinced. From her perspective, after caring for a seriously ill family member for so long, maybe he was simply under too much stress and imagining things. Honestly, that explanation sounded far more believable than a terminal cancer patient suddenly sitting up. But Chen Yang didn't waste time arguing. He directly pulled the nurse toward the ward and told her she would understand once she saw it herself. When they arrived, the scene in front of them completely overturned her understanding of reality. Grandfather was casually walking around the room. Walking. This was the same patient whose records described him as barely hanging on. Seeing Chen Yang enter, the old man casually asked what the doctor had said. Meanwhile, the nurse stood frozen. After staring for several seconds, she blurted out in shock, then turned around and ran out of the room. She hurried off to call Dr. Han immediately. As soon as she left, Chen Yang finally relaxed. It worked. Grandfather, equally excited, agreed. It had really worked. A few moments later, hurried footsteps approached. Dr. Han rushed into the ward and immediately asked where the patient was. The moment she saw him, she paused. Without saying anything, she walked over and personally began examining him. At this point, Chen Yang's father was visibly nervous. He quickly asked how the old man's condition looked. After checking him, Dr. Han admitted that based on what she was seeing, old Master Chen's condition was unexpectedly excellent. In fact, his recovery was so unusual that even she found it difficult to believe. Hearing that, Chen Yang immediately asked whether that meant his grandfather was completely cured. Dr. Han remained cautious. She explained that a full conclusion couldn't be made yet. A complete examination was still necessary, and she hoped the family would cooperate. Grandfather immediately agreed and said he would follow Chen Yang's arrangements. With that settled, Dr. Han asked everyone to come with her. Then she added another piece of good news: the hospital would cover all examination costs. The moment Chen Yang's father heard that, he repeatedly thanked her. Soon afterward, the examinations began. Sometime later, the results finally returned. Everyone gathered around while Dr. Han reviewed the scans. Chen Yang's father nervously asked about the outcome. Then came the result. According to the CT images, all tumors had disappeared. Every single one. Even the cancer cells that had spread throughout the body were gone. For a moment, the family simply stood there. Grandfather himself looked full of energy. Excitedly, he declared that he felt 20 years younger. He looked ready to start exercising immediately. Chen Yang quickly told him to calm down. His father also reminded him that he had only just recovered and should still take things slowly. But Dr. Han interrupted. Looking at the reports, she explained there was actually nothing to worry about. Not only had the cancer disappeared, all of his age-related illnesses had vanished as well. According to the examination results, his overall health was now exceptionally good. Even Dr. Han sounded surprised reading the report. After hearing this, Chen Yang's father immediately asked the question he cared about most. Could they discharge him? Dr. Han nodded. Yes, but there was one condition. Everyone immediately became tense again. Dr. Han explained that recovery like this was extraordinarily rare. Because of that, she wanted to continue monitoring him. She would stay in contact and conduct regular follow-ups. Chen Yang's father immediately agreed and promised complete cooperation. Grandfather, however, remained in an excellent mood. He warmly invited Dr. Han to visit their house whenever she had free time. Dr. Han smiled and scheduled another examination 1 week later. If everything remained stable, the family could stop worrying. Everyone agreed. Meanwhile, Grandfather kept reminding Dr. Han not to forget the invitation. Chen Yang quietly hoped he wouldn't keep talking. Unfortunately, the old man had another topic in mind. As the family prepared to leave, Grandfather suddenly looked at Dr. Han and asked Chen Yang whether she would make a good granddaughter-in-law. As Chen Yang and his family left the hospital, Dr. Han remained thoughtful. The more she considered what happened, the stranger it became. Something wasn't adding up. Back in her office, she started reviewing records. Chen Jianjin's condition had actually been worse than old Master Chu's case. Yet somehow, he recovered completely. The more she compared cases, the more suspicious it felt. Eventually, her thoughts drifted toward a certain person. Meanwhile, at the Chu family estate, people moved around busily. At that moment, a young woman received a phone call. She was in the middle of hurrying to a company meeting and casually told the caller that she didn't really have time to chat right now. On the other end of the call, Dr. Han dropped unexpected news. A patient with terminal liver cancer had completely recovered today without any warning signs beforehand. That immediately caught the other woman's attention. She stopped walking and asked whether Dr. Han meant complete recovery. Dr. Han confirmed it. Not only were the examination results completely normal, every trace of cancer cells had disappeared. Hearing that, her expression changed. She immediately instructed her assistant to postpone the company meeting. The assistant looked surprised, but nobody questioned the order. At this moment, the meeting no longer mattered. A terminal cancer patient returning from the brink of death was far more important. She quickly asked what medicine had been used and what treatment the patient received. But Dr. Han gave an unexpected answer. As far as she could verify, the recovery had nothing to do with the treatment plan. That only increased her curiosity. She requested the patient's complete records and examination data. Dr. Han agreed, but warned her not to expect too much. She doubted the records would reveal anything meaningful. Naturally, That made the situation feel even stranger. The president of the Chu family asked why. Dr. Han finally revealed the detail that had been bothering her. She had already issued a critical condition notice. The patient had been at death's door. Yet on the exact day his grandson visited, he suddenly recovered. The timing was simply too precise. Dr. Han then suggested that if she really wanted answers, investigating the grandson would probably be faster. Immediately, the woman focused on that detail. The grandson? Dr. Han confirmed it. His name was Chen Yang. If she wanted answers, she should quietly investigate him. The woman repeated the name to herself. Chen Yang. Then she calmly said she remembered it. And just like that, Chen Yang had no idea that one hospital visit had already attracted the attention of another powerful figure. Because once influential people started paying attention, things usually became complicated very quickly. Before sunrise, Chen Yang was already preparing to leave again. His father noticed and asked where he was going so early without even eating breakfast. Chen Yang quickly came up with an excuse. He said he was meeting an old classmate. His father reminded him not to stay out too long because the family planned to hold a banquet that evening to celebrate grandfather's discharge. Chen Yang assured him he would return on time. After leaving, he headed into a narrow alley. Walking deeper inside, he carefully observed the surroundings. No surveillance. Very few pedestrians. Perfect. This place was ideal for teleporting unnoticed. Then he suddenly laughed to himself. At this point, Li Lu and Uncle Wei had unknowingly become his universal excuse whenever he mentioned old classmates. Without anyone around, he activated the ring. Energy gathered around him. The next moment, he disappeared. Meanwhile, back in the wasteland, Li Lu was happily enjoying a special snack. She was completely focused until she noticed Chen Yang finally arriving. She immediately asked whether the urgent matter from earlier had been resolved. Chen Yang got straight to the point. The recovery serum had performed extremely well. After discussing it with his organization, they had decided to deepen cooperation with the Doctors Association. Then he gave a new order. Biological armor would become the top priority. As for the remaining vegetables, trade all of them for enhancement serums. Every single one. Li Lu nearly choked. She asked whether he really meant all of them. Enhancement serums could only be used once. Buying so many sounded excessive. But Chen Yang wasn't worried. These serums wouldn't just be for the two of them anymore. His organization had decided to establish a branch base in this region. Li Lu froze. A real branch base? Then she immediately pointed out the risks. The area was surrounded by zombies, mutants, and dangerous factions. This wasn't exactly a safe location. But Chen Yang had already decided. He planned to establish an operational base using Gray Rat District as the foundation. Before moving forward, though, he asked the most important question. Could the people here be trusted? Li Lu thought for a moment. Compared with larger settlements, District D residents were weaker. But they were united. And more importantly, they were trustworthy. Chen Yang nodded. That was exactly what he wanted to hear. Strength wasn't the problem. Strength could be improved through serums. Character was harder to build. Then, he casually said something that left Li Lu speechless. His goal wasn't to raise only the elites. He wanted every member of the base to reach at least Tier 4. As for key personnel like Li Lu, Tier 5 or even higher. Li Lu froze. The way he talked about enhancement serums made it sound like bulk supplies. Chen Yang noticed her reaction and asked whether obtaining that many serums was impossible. Li Lu quickly shook her head. That wasn't the issue. The real problem was much more serious. If everyone in District D reached Tier 4, a major crisis would appear. Potentially enough to destroy the entire district. Then she asked him something unusual. After injecting the enhancement serum, had his appetite increased? Chen Yang paused. Thinking back, he admitted she was right. He had been eating 3 or 4 times more than before. Li Lu explained. Enhancement serums strengthened cells and dramatically increased physical ability, but they also massively increased energy consumption. Power wasn't free. The stronger someone became, the more fuel their body required. Chen Yang immediately understood. If the number of enhanced humans increased, food demand would rise with it. But Li Lu wasn't finished. Appetite increased with each tier. An ordinary person might need only half a kilogram of food per day. Chen Yang currently needed around 1.5 kilograms. Li Lu herself consumed roughly 2.5. And a Tier 4 enhanced human would require around 8 kilograms every single day. At that point, it wasn't eating anymore. It was continuous resource consumption. Li Lu finally explained the real danger. Gray Rat District currently had more than 200 residents. If all of them became Tier 4, the surrounding ecosystem would collapse. Every nearby animal would eventually be hunted. And once food disappeared, even enhanced humans would begin starving. At that moment, Chen Yang finally understood what Li Lu was worried about. A powerful army sounded great. A powerful army capable of accidentally consuming an entire ecosystem. Not so much. But after doing the math in his head, he wasn't particularly concerned. More than 200 Tier 4 enhanced humans would indeed require over a ton of food every day. But unlike everyone else, he had access to an entire modern world. Compared to the problems he had already solved, food was actually one of the easier ones. So he told Li Lu not to worry. As the boss, guaranteeing food supplies was his responsibility. Her responsibility was building the base and making sure it could withstand outside threats. Li Lu immediately agreed. Then Chen Yang made a promise. No matter how strong someone became, everyone in the base would have enough to eat. Hearing that, Li Lu was genuinely moved. Before she could become too emotional, Chen Yang quickly changed the subject and asked her to take him to Uncle Wei. She nodded and led the way. Under the blazing heat, the two soon arrived. Uncle Wei greeted both of them. Chen Yang immediately asked about progress. Uncle Wei honestly admitted that the computer technology Chen Yang provided felt outdated from his perspective. Even so, there were still many details he needed to study before fully understanding it. Chen Yang commented that progress sounded a little slow. Uncle Wei quickly reassured him. If the task was only adapting existing computer software, he could already start. The real problem was that he hadn't had a functioning computer for practice. After all, learning computers without an actual computer wasn't exactly efficient. Chen Yang smiled. That was exactly why he came prepared. He placed a large box on the ground. Pointing at it, he told Uncle Wei to use this. The moment the computer was assembled, Uncle Wei became excited. He powered on and immediately started exploring. As he worked, his eyes gradually brightened. Very quickly, he began understanding how the operating system and hardware interacted. After some time, he confidently looked up. As long as the hardware was sufficient, there would be no problem. He could build whatever Chen Yang needed. Only then did Chen Yang reveal his real objective. He wanted an online game. Not just any game, it had to run on mobile phones from 200 years earlier. Then he handed over a phone with a game already installed as reference. He asked Uncle Wei to use it as a template. There was only one requirement. The final product had to be even better and more engaging. Uncle Wei agreed and immediately started studying it. Soon, sound effects began playing. First blood, double kill, triple kill, quadra kill, pentakill. As he continued, his expression became increasingly strange. Eventually, he looked up and asked a devastating question. Could this even be called a game? According to him, some of the worst entertainment products before the Great Cataclysm had far more advanced design than this. Then he made another suggestion. If Chen Yang allowed him to reference game concepts from before the Great Cataclysm, development could move much faster. Chen Yang immediately agreed. Referencing wasn't copying. Totally different things. Definitely. Then he told Uncle Wei to focus entirely on finishing the project. As an extra incentive, there would be an additional reward after completion. That made Uncle Wei even more motivated. Chen Yang then asked the question he cared about most. How long would development take? After estimating briefly, Uncle Wei answered. 7 days. At most 7 days. The entire project will be finished. Chen Yang froze. For a moment, he genuinely didn't know how to react. Back in his world, major games often required years. Even seemingly simple mobile games usually took months. Yet this man was casually discussing building an online game within a week. Once again, Chen Yang felt the enormous technological gap between the two worlds. Meanwhile, Uncle Wei completely misunderstood his silence. Instead of assuming Chen Yang was shocked by the speed, he thought the boss felt disappointed. Immediately becoming nervous, he hesitated before speaking again. Actually, it could be even faster. There were several people in District D who understood Intel brain technology. If they joined, development speed would improve significantly. Then he gave a new estimate. Less than 5 days. This time, Chen Yang almost lost composure. 5 days. There were people in his world who spent 5 days deciding an application icon. Meanwhile, this man wanted to build an online game. Chen Yang silently laughed. Without hesitation, he patted Uncle Wei on the shoulder, gave him a thumbs up, and told him to recruit anyone he needed. But Uncle Wei still looked hesitant. More people meant more supplies, more food, more resources. Wouldn't that increase the burden? Chen Yang simply waved the concern away. Originally, he had planned to recruit everyone in Gray Rat District anyway. The moment those words left Chen Yang's mouth, Uncle Wei froze. For a second, he thought he had misheard. Li Lu stepped forward and confirmed it. Chen Yang really intended to establish a base of his own. As long as someone was loyal and trustworthy, they could be recruited. The moment Uncle Wei understood, his emotions overflowed. His eyes turned red. His voice trembled. Then before anyone could stop him, he dropped to his knees. He declared that Chen Yang was their savior. Chen Yang was caught completely off guard. He quickly told him not to do that. From his perspective, this was simply employment. A boss hiring workers. Nothing more. But Uncle Wei shook his head. Chen Yang didn't understand. The tax collection period was approaching. If not for his arrival, everyone in Gray Rat District would soon be facing disaster. Chen Yang became curious. Tax collection? This was the first time he had heard about it. He asked why nobody mentioned it earlier. Li Lu let out a quiet sigh. It was a long story. She promised to explain after she finished contacting the settlement residents. Chen Yang nodded. There were more urgent matters for now. He left the phone behind for testing and reminded Uncle Wei. He expected to see the finished game within 5 days. Uncle Wei immediately guaranteed success. No hesitation. No doubt. Only confidence. With everything settled, Chen Yang announced he would be leaving. Uncle Wei respectfully wished him a safe trip. As Chen Yang gradually disappeared into the distance, Li Lu and Uncle Wei remained watching. After a while, Uncle Wei finally asked the question that had been bothering him. What exactly was their boss's background? The more he thought about it, the stranger everything felt. Every item Chen Yang brought looked like it came from centuries ago. Yet every single one looked completely new. No damage, no aging, not even signs of storage. They looked fresher than newly manufactured goods. Li Lu quietly admitted she didn't know either. But she said one thing with certainty. Since the boss didn't want to reveal his secrets, she had no intention of investigating them. For now, that was enough. Uncle Wei then asked another question. How could they be sure Chen Yang didn't have bad intentions? Li Lu repeated the phrase quietly. Bad intentions? Uncle Wei pointed around the room. Their district was so poor it barely had anything worth stealing. What exactly could Chen Yang even gain by plotting against them? Li Lu actually paused to think. Then she suddenly realized something. The food Chen Yang casually brought over in the past few days, by itself, was enough to recruit an army of enhanced humans. That food alone was worth more than most of Gray Rat District's assets. Uncle Wei admitted she had a point. But Li Lu still shook her head. Chen Yang felt different. Unlike ordinary wasteland survivors, he carried a calm atmosphere around him. People here survived through caution, hostility, and desperation. Chen Yang had none of that. In fact, she wasn't worried about him harming others. She was more worried someone else might harm him. From her perspective, their boss was practically walking around with a giant target attached to his back. Uncle Wei suddenly understood. Was that why she deliberately avoided telling him about tax collection? Li Lu nodded. That was exactly why. To her, Chen Yang was the only opportunity Gray Rat District had to completely change its future. Before involving him, she wanted to remove every unnecessary risk. Uncle Wei finally understood. With renewed determination, he declared he would complete Chen Yang's assignment as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, back in the modern world, Chen Yang returned to the familiar alley. After teleporting back, he immediately remembered another issue. His phone. It was probably time to replace it. But before leaving, something strange happened. A powerful sensation rose from deep inside his body. Chen Yang stopped. The feeling was impossible to ignore. He carefully checked himself. Then realization struck. This was exactly what Li Lu described. The Tier 1 enhancement serum had been fully absorbed, which meant his body was ready for the next upgrade. A smile appeared. Looks like he could finally inject the Tier 2 serum. The moment he confirmed the condition, he immediately decided to proceed later. But then, he remembered another urgent problem. His phone was dead, so he headed straight to a phone store. A saleswoman enthusiastically started introducing the newest flagship model. Before she even finished the first sentence, Chen Yang interrupted. No explanation needed. He would take it. The saleswoman froze. Customers like this were every salesperson's dream. No comparisons. No endless questions. Just buy and leave. A little later, after activating the phone, Chen Yang checked it. Instant regret. 8 missed calls. All from Lu Run. Seeing them, he nearly slapped himself. He had completely forgotten. Meanwhile, at Lu Run's house, she was already checking her phone while getting ready. The moment the call connected, She immediately demanded to know where he disappeared to and why he ignored so many calls. Chen Yang quickly explained. His phone broke. He only just replaced it. Fortunately, this time the excuse happened to be true. After hearing him, Lu Run calmed down. She told him to stay where he was. She would personally come pick him up. Then she turned to her father and asked for the car keys. She explained that she needed to pick up an old classmate. Her father immediately became suspicious. His daughter putting on makeup and personally driving to pick up a boy, that naturally triggered every protective father instinct. Lu Run rolled her eyes and explained Chen Yang wasn't coming for her. He was coming to inspect the factory. Hearing that, her father became even more confused. A male classmate coming to inspect the factory? In his mind, he had already started imagining his precious daughter slowly being taken away. The poor man began worrying before anything had even happened. Still, he told her to hurry and bring Chen Yang directly to the factory. Meanwhile, Chen Yang agreed and headed over. About half an hour later, a car sped toward Lu Run's food factory. Inside the passenger seat, Chen Yang looked like he was experiencing something halfway between transportation and survival training. By the time they arrived, his expression looked slightly shaken. Lu Run noticed immediately and asked whether her driving was really that scary. Chen Yang instantly denied it. Of course not. Unfortunately, his face completely disagreed. After arriving, Chen Yang finally met Lu Run's father. The older man warmly welcomed him and thanked him for making the trip despite the remote location. Chen Yang immediately remained respectful. He pointed out that he and Lu Run had known each other since middle school and said uncle could simply treat him as a junior. But Lu Run's father refused. Business was business. If they were discussing cooperation, then Chen Yang should be treated as a business partner. He then asked whether Lu Run had already explained the factory situation. Chen Yang nodded. She had explained a little. But instead of wasting time, he asked directly how much monthly demand was required for the factory to operate normally. Lu Run's father quickly started calculating. Employee salaries, factory rent, utilities, raw materials. To maintain operations, they needed nearly 300,000 yuan every month. Chen Yang listened quietly, then asked another question. If monthly demand reached 400,000 yuan, would the factory not only survive but become profitable? The atmosphere changed instantly. Lu Run's father visibly froze. Meanwhile, Lu Run looked delighted. Unlike her father, she already knew. Chen Yang wasn't asking casually. He meant it. After recovering, her father immediately confirmed. At that level, the factory wouldn't just survive. It would finally become profitable again. Just when the discussion seemed finished, Lu Run's father suddenly pulled her aside. He asked Chen Yang to wait for a moment. Chen Yang casually agreed. The moment they were out of hearing range, the father lowered his voice. Something didn't feel right. Chen Yang didn't look like someone negotiating business. He looked like someone doing charity. Honestly, the old man wasn't entirely wrong. Who casually appears and offers enough orders to rescue an entire factory? Then he asked something that instantly made Lu Run blush. Had she secretly helped secure this deal using her charm? Immediately, she pushed him away. Absolutely not. Stop imagining things. Seeing the reaction, her father quickly retreated. Message received. No more questions. A while later, he returned and resumed business. He asked whether there were any special requirements. Chen Yang nodded. Only one. The packaging had to stay simple. No trademarks. No production dates. No ingredient lists. Nothing. Her father was immediately surprised. Products like that technically wouldn't comply with regulations. But Chen Yang reassured him. This food wasn't intended for market sale. He had other uses for it. As long as production remained stable, the type of food wasn't important. Then he casually revealed another detail. The 400,000 yuan monthly order wasn't the target. It was only the minimum. In the future, orders would increase, not decrease. The father was stunned. At this point, he was starting to wonder whether Chen Yang secretly owned a giant corporation. He asked one final time, was he serious? Chen Yang calmly nodded. Not only was he serious, he could sign immediately. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now. Soon. The three of them sat inside the office. The contract was prepared and placed on a desk. Lu Run's father asked him to review it carefully and request any changes. Chen Yang barely glanced at it. He smiled and said he trusted uncle's business practices. Then he signed. Immediately. Then, he did something even more surprising. He transferred payment immediately. When the notification arrived, Lu Run's father checked the amount and froze. It wasn't a deposit. It was the entire payment, paid in advance. He looked up and asked why. Chen Yang simply smiled. Then he stood and shook hands again. He said he trusted Lu Run and trusted Uncle even more. The father nodded respectfully. At this point, he no longer saw Chen Yang as simply his daughter's classmate. He treated him as a serious business partner. With genuine appreciation, he thanked him for the cooperation. Meanwhile, back in Grey Rat District D, nearly all the residents had gathered. People stood shoulder to shoulder, quietly discussing what was happening. Li Lu looked across the crowd and told Chen Yang everyone was here. As Chen Yang walked toward the front, people continued whispering. Some remained skeptical. One person looked at his ordinary appearance and questioned whether someone this young was reliable. Another shrugged. Whoever came didn't matter. They were already poor enough that there wasn't much left to lose. Sometimes, when life becomes difficult enough, taking a gamble starts sounding reasonable. Chen Yang cleared his throat. The crowd gradually quieted. Then he introduced himself. His name was Chen Yang, and from today onward, he planned to establish his own base in Grey Rat District D. From now on, he would be their boss. The moment Chen Yang finished speaking, silence. Complete silence. No cheers. No reaction. Chen Yang immediately became confused. Then he realized something. These people didn't care about titles. They cared about survival. So he stopped wasting words and went straight to the point. Anyone who joined him would receive food support. Not only that, he guaranteed that nobody under him would ever go hungry again. The effect was immediate. It worked better than any speech. People's eyes lit up instantly. A woman excitedly asked whether he was serious. Others looked at each other in disbelief. Several survivors asked if joining him really meant they would no longer have to worry about food. Chen Yang nodded confidently. Absolutely. The crowd erupted. A moment ago, everyone looked exhausted and hopeless. Now, they looked like they had suddenly found hope. One woman even started cheering for Boss Chen. And just like that, the atmosphere completely changed. Chen Yang finally felt satisfied. Now this was more like it. But he wasn't finished. He told everyone that all they had to do was follow his plans and work together to turn Grey Rat District D into a real base. Then he described the future. The rusted wire fences would become solid walls. The broken shelters would become clean homes. Most importantly, they would live like people, not survive like gray rats. The crowd listened quietly. For many of them, the future he described felt impossible. Some couldn't help asking whether such things could actually happen. Seeing the hesitation, Chen Yang took another step. Anyone willing to join would receive 1 week's worth of food in advance. Li Lu was the first to cheer. Soon, everyone joined. The chants spread across the settlement. Long live Boss Chen! Long live Boss Chen! The voices echoed across Grey Rat District. After the excitement gradually settled, Chen Yang announced that registration would begin. Anyone willing to join could come forward. The moment he finished, chaos broke out. People rushed forward. One young man tried squeezing to the front, shouting that he wanted to register first. A woman immediately argued back that women should go first. Even in the apocalypse, some things never changed. Registration began. Li Lu introduced people one by one. The first was Li Hua, 17 years old. Unlike most survivors, he understood a little about Intel brain technology. That immediately caught Chen Yang's attention. Talent like this was valuable. Without hesitation, he assigned Li Hua to Uncle Wei as an assistant. Then he offered salary, 25 jin of food, 6 jin of raw meat each month. Was that acceptable? Li Hua agreed instantly. He looked afraid the offer might disappear if he hesitated. Chen Yang handed over the agreement and moved on. Next, a tall and muscular young man stepped forward. He admitted he had no technical skills, but said he had strength. Li Lu introduced him. Jiang Qi, 24 years old. Already a tier 1 enhanced human. Chen Yang looked him over. The man looked powerful. After observing him, Chen Yang joked that this physique was perfect for construction work. Poor Jiang Qi probably expected combat, and somehow ended up assigned to engineering. Then came the offer. 40 jin of food, 20 jin of raw meat every month. Jiang Qi's eyes widened. More than enough. He accepted immediately. One after another, people continued stepping forward. Some had skills. Some had strength. Some simply wanted to work. But regardless, Chen Yang gave each person a role. And stability. For the first time in a long time, the people of Grey Rat District felt like they could see a future. By the time recruitment ended, people left smiling. Even Chen Yang felt satisfied. Li Lu finished counting, then reported Every single survivor in Gray Rat District D had signed up. Every one of them. Chen Yang quietly exhaled. Recruitment was complete. Now it was time to discuss something more serious. He turned toward Li Lu. She still hadn't explained tax collection. This time, Li Lu didn't avoid the topic. Every 3 months, Gray Rat Town collected taxes from all subordinate settlements. And the tax wasn't money. It was food. Chen Yang frowned. These people could barely survive. How are they supposed to hand over food? Then he asked, weren't the rulers worried people would simply leave? Li Lu smiled bitterly. Leave? Leave to where? The wasteland worked like this. Inside settlements, survival was difficult. Outside, survival was almost impossible. Most people didn't have choices. Stay and suffer, or leave and die. That was reality. Chen Yang then raised another point. There were already several enhanced humans here. Why not resist? Why not fight back? Li Lu immediately shook her head. Gray Rat Town maintained control through an entire force of high-level enhanced humans. Compared with them, District D couldn't resist. The gap in strength was simply too great. Hearing that, Chen Yang finally connected all the pieces. Everything suddenly became clear. The rulers weren't collecting food because they lacked supplies. They were collecting food because food meant power. The less food ordinary settlements possessed, the harder it became to trade for enhancement serums. And the fewer enhancement serums they obtained, the weaker they remained. Realizing this, Chen Yang understood something else. Conflict was unavoidable. If Gray Rat District kept growing, Gray Rat Town would eventually notice. And once that happened, confrontation would only be a matter of time. That meant there wasn't much time left. Chen Yang immediately reached a conclusion. They needed enhancement serums. A lot of them. And they needed them fast. Li Lu immediately understood. Chen Yang stated their next objective. Before the next tax collection, they had to build enough strength to surpass Gray Rat Town. Meanwhile, back in a modern world, as soon as the plane landed at Diang Airport, Chen Yang headed out. Along the way, he wondered how things were progressing on Danden's side. Before he had time to look around, Danden was already waving at him. After meeting up, Chen Yang asked why she personally came to pick him up. Danden immediately fired back. Now he was the big boss, while she was just a miserable employee. Besides, if she didn't pick him up, he probably wouldn't even know where the company was. Chen Yang silently admitted she had a point. A while later, they arrived at the company building. After taking a look, Chen Yang commented that the place looked impressive. Danden immediately took credit. She proudly announced that she personally chose it. As they walked inside, she began introducing the layout. Regular employee offices were on both sides. Chen Yang's office was at the end. Then she opened the door. What did he think? Chen Yang walked in, looked around carefully, then sat down. After observing everything, he nodded. He was satisfied. Not bad for a newly established company. Once seated, he asked about recruitment progress. Danden reported that finance and legal positions had already been filled. Other departments were still recruiting. After finishing, she asked whether they should organize a meeting with employees. Chen Yang immediately rejected the idea. There wasn't much point. He wouldn't even know what to say. Danden looked speechless. She had never seen a startup founder become hands-off this quickly. The company had barely started, and he was already delegating. Chen Yang remained unconcerned. His focus would be products, research and development. Everything else went to Danden. Immediately, she realized what was happening. She said she knew he planned to overwork her. Chen Yang immediately corrected her. This wasn't exploitation. This was training, developing talent in advance. Then he casually patted her head and said, once the company expanded, she could become his right-hand person. Danden clearly enjoyed hearing that, but she still sighed. She genuinely didn't understand where he got this confidence. Then she warned him not to destroy the company. Chen Yang remained calm. After all, he had technological support nobody else knew about. With 200 years of technological advantage, he didn't think failure was likely. After discussing recruitment, Chen Yang suddenly asked about game publishing platforms. Danden reported that most channels were already arranged under standard revenue-sharing agreements. Then she handed over the contracts. Mobile brand app stores still required review procedures. Those would take more time. But there was one issue. Chen Yang asked what happened. Danden explained. The problem came from a fruit phone app store. Their contact strongly hinted that they should offer kickbacks. Otherwise, their approval would simply remain delayed. Chen Yang immediately became unhappy. He had no intention of paying. Not even a little. Danden understood, but reminded him of reality. Fruit Phone held enormous market share. If their game couldn't launch there, they would lose many users. But Chen Yang remained calm. Their product would speak for itself. Sooner or later, the other side would come asking them instead. Dandin shrugged. He was the boss. Then she returned to work. After she left, Chen Yang leaned back in his chair. Then another thought appeared. Would developing his own mobile phone brand be possible someday? If he controlled the platform, he could also earn from games developed by others. Interesting, but too early. One step at a time. For now, there were more important things. So he got up and prepared to leave. But right then, someone appeared directly in front of him. A familiar face. They recognized each other almost instantly. Chen Yang recognized Feng Jia, and Feng Jia recognized him. Just as he was about to leave, she suddenly called out, "What a coincidence!" Then she immediately asked, where was his girlfriend? Chen Yang paused, then remembered. Jiang Jinglong had previously spread rumors that Shuya was his girlfriend. No wonder she asked. Wanting to avoid the topic, he asked what she was doing here. Feng Jia explained, she came for a job interview. She planned to change jobs, and just talking about it seemed to put her in a surprisingly good mood. Meanwhile, Chen Yang couldn't help wondering, could Feng Jia be interviewing at his company? That would be one unbelievable coincidence. Still, he didn't ask. Instead, he simply wished her good luck and prepared to leave. But before he could go, Feng Jia suddenly stopped him. Chen Yang turned back and asked if something else was wrong. Looking slightly hesitant, Feng Jia brought up next week's class reunion. She explained that Jiang Jinglong planned to invite all the classmates still living and daxing out for dinner. Then she asked whether Chen Yang intended to attend. Chen Yang looked at her and asked, did she want him to go? Feng Jia smiled lightly and said there weren't many classmates left in daxing anymore. Keeping in touch might help everyone support each other in the future. After hearing that, Chen Yang agreed. He said he'd be there on time. With that, the two parted ways. Meanwhile, back in Grey Rat District E, construction was progressing at full speed. The moment Chen Yang appeared, people immediately greeted him wherever he went. Voices calling out, "Boss Chun," echoed throughout the settlement. Compared to when he first arrived, the atmosphere had completely changed. Chen Yang inspected the construction area and asked about progress on the defensive perimeter. One of the workers quickly reported that everything was moving smoothly. Now that everyone had enough food, morale had skyrocketed. People were working harder than ever. At the current pace, the entire perimeter should be fully enclosed within a few more days. Once completed, ordinary mutant creatures would no longer be able to break into the base. Hearing that, Chen Yang asked the more important question. What about human enhancers? Could these defenses stop them too? The worker hesitated before answering. Against humans, their effectiveness will be much lower. Mutants could be trapped. Humans could think. And once intelligence entered the equation, ordinary defenses became far less reliable. Chen Yang nodded silently. There was still a long way to go. The base's armaments had to improve further. Just then, someone suddenly noticed a familiar figure approaching. Immediately, someone shouted excitedly. Li Lu had returned. A moment later, Li Lu arrived carrying her pack. Although she looked exhausted from the trip, the moment she saw Chen Yang, her expression immediately brightened. Without hesitation, she rushed forward and jumped into his arms. Chen Yang caught her and smiled. Welcome back. You worked hard. Li Lu quickly regained focus and opened her bag. Getting straight to business, she revealed that all the enhancement serums Chen Yang requested had been successfully obtained. Then she displayed the collection. With this batch, every resident in Grey Rat District could reach Tier 4 enhancement. Seeing the quantity, Chen Yang immediately asked whether the Doctors Association had raised any objections. After all, this wasn't a small transaction. Li Lu shook her head. Why would they object? This single trade helped them complete over a year's worth of normal exchange demand. Not only were they unconcerned, they were thrilled. Hearing that, Chen Yang immediately gave instructions. Arrange injections for everyone as soon as possible. Li Lu paused. Even now, she's still worried about food consumption. Once everyone advanced, daily food demand would at least double. Was that really okay? Chen Yang calmly patted her shoulder. No need to worry. There was enough food. And in the future, there would be even more varieties and flavors. The moment Li Lu heard more varieties, more flavors, her attention shifted instantly. Her eyes lit up. She immediately asked if she could try them first. Chen Yang couldn't help smiling. Every time new food arrived, she would be the first to taste it. Li Lu became even happier. To her, he truly was the best boss. Then, she suddenly remembered something. Her expression became serious. During the recent trades, she discovered that rumors had already started spreading. Information about their large-scale food exchanges was leaking out. Even though they deliberately changed locations and trading personnel, the secret still spread. Chen Yang wasn't surprised. This had been inevitable from the beginning. The more resources they moved, the harder secrecy became, which was exactly why they needed strength. And they needed it quickly. Chen Yang explained that after everyone completed their serum injections, their top priority would become improving the settlement's ability to resist other enhancers. Then he reminded Li Lu of another task. Once enhancement was complete, everyone's weekly salary had to be adjusted accordingly. Li Lu nodded immediately. She would recalculate everything and report the updated figures later. But Chen Yang wasn't finished. He issued one final order. Select several smart and capable people. Send them quietly into Gray Rat Town. Their mission, to establish themselves there and act as undercover eyes and ears for the settlement. Li Lu immediately understood the purpose. This way, they wouldn't just react to Gray Rat Town, they would know what was happening before it reached them. But Chen Yang shook his head. Gathering information wasn't the only goal. They also needed to uncover what cards Gray Rat Town's rulers were hiding. Only by understanding both sides could they properly prepare for the conflict that was clearly approaching. Li Lu nodded and said she would arrange it immediately. Then, just as she was about to leave, she suddenly remembered something. According to her, Uncle Wei had sent word the research project had finally produced results. Chen Yang's attention snapped back instantly. Li Lu asked whether he wanted to confirm it personally. Chen Yang didn't hesitate. The game was finally finished. After waiting this long, he naturally wanted to see it immediately. The moment he arrived, Chen Yang asked excitedly whether the game was really complete. Uncle Wei turned around and smiled. He had come at the perfect time. Debugging had just finished. Then something unexpected happened. A tiny creature suddenly appeared nearby and chirped happily. Chen Yang stopped. What exactly was that? Uncle Wei explained that this was part of the game content Chen Yang requested. To achieve a virtual interaction effect, they used holographic projection technology to display the creatures. As he spoke, he casually interacted with the little creature. Chen Yang froze. Could this kind of effect actually run on a mobile phone? Uncle Wei nodded confidently. Not only that, to match the phone's hardware limitations, they had developed a dedicated optimization algorithm. By their standards, it was somewhat outdated, but extremely stable. Then, Chen Yang pressed a button. Instantly, another creature appeared from the phone and jumped onto him. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He asked for a mobile game. Uncle Wei handed him science fiction. Uncle Wei noticed the silence and became nervous. Did the boss dislike the result? But Chen Yang wasn't disappointed. He simply hadn't recovered from the shock yet. Then he immediately asked, what was the manifestation range? Uncle Wei explained that since the holographic projection depended on the camera system, the effective range was roughly 3 meters. Chen Yang nodded, then asked another question. Could all of this run through ordinary computer programming? Uncle Wei replied confidently, yes, although he had designed an entirely new programming language for this project. Would that be acceptable? The moment Chen Yang heard that, his eyes lit up. Acceptable? This result exceeded even his highest expectations. Only then did Uncle Wei finally relax. The poor man looked like he had aged several years. Chen Yang noticed and asked if he was all right. Uncle Wei insisted he was fine. He simply hadn't slept for a long time. Chen Yang immediately told him to sit down and rest. But Uncle Wei still insisted on remaining available in case adjustments were needed. Then Chen Yang remembered one last question. How large was the game? Uncle Wei explained that to reduce storage requirements, they utilized cloud architecture. Terminal devices only needed to process minimal data. Final installation size, just over 400 megabytes. Chen Yang stared at him. 400 megabytes. A holographic mobile game. With creature interaction and cloud support. At this point, wasteland technology no longer felt advanced. It felt unreasonable. Uncle Wei added one limitation. Because of cloud processing, the game could no longer run offline. Players had to stay connected. Chen Yang wasn't worried at all. In fact, he looked pleased. If people weren't online, how were they supposed to recharge? Then he asked another important question. What monetization systems had been implemented? Uncle Wei pulled up the interface. Many mechanics had been referenced from pre-Cataclysm games. VIP privileges, draw systems, collection books, character progression, familiar classics. Looking through everything, Chen Yang realized something. Technology changed, but monetization apparently evolved into an immortal art. After showing everything, Uncle Wei asked whether there were more questions. Chen Yang shook his head. Only one remained. When could he receive the source code? Uncle Wei explained that one final balance pass remained. If everything went smoothly, delivery would happen tomorrow morning. Chen Yang nodded, then changed topics. Pointing at his phone, he asked Uncle Wei what he thought of it. Uncle Wei glanced at it, then gave a brutal evaluation. A very well-preserved piece of junk. A respectable antique. Chen Yang silently accepted emotional damage. He bought it recently. Apparently, that still counted as ancient. Recovering quickly, he asked something else. Could they design a brand new smartphone? This time, Uncle Wei shook his head. Software was his field. Industrial design wasn't. But Grey Rat Town was larger. If Chen Yang wanted specialists, that would be the place to search. Chen Yang remembered that. For now, the phone project could wait. Games came first. He told Uncle Wei to focus on optimization. If the final version exceeded expectations, everyone involved would receive bonuses. Uncle Wei instantly regained motivation. They wouldn't disappoint him. As evening approached, Chen Yang returned to the modern world. Managing hundreds of people at once wasn't easy. Just then his phone rang. Unknown number. After answering, a woman introduced herself. Chu Xian. She wanted to meet tonight and discuss business. Chen Yang immediately became suspicious. Scammers were upgrading. Chu Xian seemed to sense his thoughts and offered to prove herself. But Chen Yang wasn't interested. Food was more important. He hung up. Dinner came first. Looking at the dishes, he couldn't help admiring his own cooking. Then, the door opened. Shuya returned. She looked exhausted and let out a long sigh. Chen Yang smiled. Perfect timing. Dinner's ready. He asked whether she had gone to another audition. She nodded, but something felt wrong. After a moment, she finally explained. She had auditioned for a new project directed by one of her favorite directors. A major production. Potential ratings champion. Chen Yang was surprised. Even newcomers could audition? Shuya suddenly laughed helplessly. She wasn't competing for the female lead. Not even a supporting role. Just a background character with 4 lines. And she still didn't get selected. Chen Yang asked whether someone tried pulling strings again. She shook her head. This time, the role simply went to someone with connections. After saying that, she looked even more discouraged. Maybe she just wasn't suited to acting. Chen Yang was about to respond, but suddenly, her phone rang. She stepped aside and answered. At first, she listened quietly. Then her expression changed. Excitement. Disbelief. She asked whether what she was hearing was real. After ending the call, she slowly turned toward Chen Yang. The look made him uncomfortable. He asked why she was staring. Then, Shuya said something completely unexpected. She thought she needed to get to know him all over again. Chen Yang blinked. What exactly did she mean by that?